Each year we dedicate the summit to one of our community partners or an individual who has supported our mission of preventing and reducing youth substance misuse while building healthy foundations and promising futures for our youth. This year, we are dedicating the summit to Plymouth Regional High School. This April, the advanced art students, led by their teacher Lynn Sanborn, planned an elaborate fundraiser called Convergence, which brought together the school and community to present an evening of fine arts, including original creations of the advanced art students with a prevention theme. Many of these works are on display in the lobby. Please stop by to see them. The students raised over $6,000 from more than 100 pieces of art for CADY and the Circle program. I would like to invite the PRHS students in attendance and Lynn Sanborn up to receive the dedication. Naro, our executive director, and Kathy Kearns, who's the executive director of the Circle program.
How grateful CADY and the Circle program are both organizations that are all about youth. To have a youth-led fundraising initiative at this caliber is something you rarely see, and it was just beautiful. So I want to thank the students, thank Lynn Sanborn, and also thank their amazing principal, Bruce Parsons. I know he's here as well, so thank you, PRHS.
On behalf of the Circle program, I'm always amazed at how much talent there is in this town. It's so good to see kids doing wonderful things. So, thank you.
At this time, we'd like to present both CADY and the Circle program, each with checks for $3,000.
Gotta take a picture. Next, we'd like to acknowledge elected officials who took time from their no doubt busy schedules to be with us this morning. Governor Sununu is going to be joining us shortly. Also, combating the drug and opioid epidemic has been a top priority for the New Hampshire House, led by Speaker Sean Jasper, who believes that taking drugs off our streets, expanding access to treatment and recovery, and saving lives is of paramount importance. We thank him for his leadership on this issue. From our federal delegation, Congresswoman Ann McLean Kuster, Senator Maggie Hass will be arriving later in the program, and Senator Shaheen was unable to be here but sent a video message which we will be sharing with you. Because we have so little time and so many to acknowledge, I'd ask that we hold our applause until the end. But we also have here Executive Counselor Joe Kenny, I believe, Senator Bob Guida, Representatives Carolyn Gargaz, whose name I butchered last year too, I'm sorry Carolyn, Steve Rand, Suzanne Smith, and Kevin Mays. Our previous District 2 State Senator Jeannie Forrester is with us today, as well as former representatives Mary Cooney and Phil Preston. Grafton County Commissioners Linda Lauer, Omer Ahern and Wendy Piper, which is all three of them, I think, are here today, as well as our Grafton County Attorney, Lara Sappho. We are also pleased to have with us a number of federal and state government officials. J.T. Fallon, who's the director of the New England High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. James Vera, Governor's Advisor on Addiction and Behavioral Health. Marty Bolden, Governor's Policy Advisor on Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. Katya Fox, Director of the New Hampshire Division of Behavioral Health. Tim Rourke, Chair of the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. Scott Sweet, Commander of the New Hampshire Drug Task Force. Ann Crawford of the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, and, as I like to say, my neighbor, Mike Bullock, Administrator and Chief of Compliance of the New Hampshire Board of Pharmacy. I'd also like to recognize Father Leo LeBlanc, who is not an elected official, but is a priest at the Holy Trinity Parish. And if I've missed anyone, speak now or forever hold your Due to time constraints, we're not going to individually recognize, but there are a lot of school boards, select board, and other local government officials here today. And let's give everybody an appreciative round of applause. Also, each year we have a number of law enforcement and emergency services personnel at the summit and recognize they are here because of their concern for the health and safety of our young people. All of these first responders risk their own lives and safety every day for our security. Many of the calls they respond to are related to drug and alcohol problems. I would like to ask them to stand for a round of applause to thank them for their dedication and their service. Our two keynote speakers, Dr. Kevin Sabet, I'm sorry, I did it again, Sabet, and Dr. Stephen Kassels have generously offered to donate the proceeds of their book sales today to CADY, so we'd like to thank them for their generosity. Each year we gather to recognize accomplishments in preventing and reducing youth alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. We use this forum to give special recognition to our coalition partners. Engaging speakers provide new information and inspiration. Of course, we can only accomplish this work with the support of our grantors and sponsors. We are grateful to the New Hampshire Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, Grafton County, and 11 municipalities in our region who contribute financially to our programs every year. We would also like to thank Alex Ray and especially Senator Jeannie Forrester for their ongoing support of the Launch Youth Entrepreneurship Program. We appreciate all of the financial support. And the people who have supported us are listed on the handouts at your table. This is the 6th year CADY has sought sponsors to underwrite the costs of this event, and we are especially grateful to the following for their contributions to the Community Health Services Network, New Hampshire Healthy Families, Spear Memorial Hospital, Bank of New Hampshire, the Common Man family of restaurants. And then I have to go to the third page, not the first. Genesis Behavioral Health, Northeast Credit Union, O'Connell Foundation, Granite State Credit Union, Doug and Sue McLean, Meredith Village Savings Bank, and Mid-State Health Center. We are also grateful, of course, to Plymouth State, I almost said Plymouth State College, but Plymouth State University for the use of this beautiful facility, as well as Sodexo Campus Services for the wonderful meal you had this morning. Other sponsors include Kathleen Kearns on behalf of the Circle Program, who you just met this morning, the Mayhew Program, Pemmon Youth Center, SAU 48, the Tapley Thompson Community Center, and Linton Sprungley for the chocolates on your tables. And with that, I'd like to have our Executive Director, Deb Naro, come to the
Thank you, Mike. And I'd also like to thank all of the CADY Board of Directors for their strong support and leadership. And special thanks go out to Mike, Tim Keefe, Lisa Lovett, and Maureen Ebner for their hands-on role. There's a lot of moving parts here, so it takes a community to make this one event happen. As I stand here looking out at you today, I only wish you could see what I see. I see commitment, collaboration, dedication, friends, and a room full of great-looking people. You get better every year. This year, we again settled on the summit theme of answering the call to action, because that's what you do. When we ask for help, you don't hesitate. You say yes. What a beautiful word. It's this collaborative spirit that generates the richness in our community and promise for our youth. Thank you for all that you do. I'm not going to talk about the problem. Sadly, you're all too familiar with the state of addiction that New Hampshire is experiencing. CADY always stays focused on solutions, specifically prevention. Let me simply say, the most responsible, humane, and fiscally responsible strategy is to stop these serious and tragic situations from occurring in the first place. That's what prevention does. The National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse has stated that prevention should be laser beamed on our children and youth. Why is prevention so important? If you look at this slide, wrong slide. Next, another slide. Okay, then, beautiful. What you see here, if you look at the pink elliptical, you see a surge of drug use from the ages of 12 to 20. I call that the addiction pipeline. And this is what happens, is if we can prevent entry to the addiction pipeline, we can prevent much addiction, a vast amount of it, because of the progression of the disease. So according to the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse, 90% of individuals who struggle with addiction began using other substances before the age of 18. So that's our work. That's why it's so vitally important. It saves lives. We've all heard countless times that we can't arrest our way or incarcerate our way out of this epidemic. We also cannot simply treat our way out of the addiction crisis. We must utilize a comprehensive process that equally values prevention, treatment, and recovery. We also know that the complex problems that we struggle with, whether it's addiction or other social issues, cannot be solved by any single entity or any person, organization, or level of government. We have to have a top-down, bottom-up approach, a non-partisan commitment, and collaborative action from all stakeholders on the local, statewide, and federal level. In other words, it takes collective action to make collective impact. And we are so fortunate as an organization, as a community, that we have that commitment in spades. Without each of you, CADY's work would look something like this. And how true that is, because no one individual can do it. We have to all get behind that boulder and push. And our elected officials reach down from the top and pull us up. And so we're working at this together. And you know what's kind of fun? The outcomes. So Walt Disney said it's kind of fun to do the impossible, and that's what we're doing, the impossible. So thank you. So we do try to lighten up a serious subject with some fun. You're going to see some good food, networking, door prizes, and hopefully a few laughs today as well. And for the first year, Ann Stock, who's flashing a card at me right now, we have a timekeeper, so because we want to respect everyone's time. But before I give up my minute, I do want to recognize our amazing staff. Last night I had a stress dream about being out on the open seas, being thrown about, and it was just, I'm like, okay, it's because there's so many moving parts to this. But I know I need not worry because of these people. Liz Brochu, they are all passionate about protecting kids. Deb Tobine, Tim Tyler, Ann Stock, Christy Zwald, Nora Doyle, and our newest staff members that will be joining us soon is are Jim Kemmerer and Victoria Brochu, and our intern Amy Manhard. And I also want to recognize our in-house volunteers, Carolyn Piantadosi and Celine Richer, and because they work to expand our capacity. What a team. They always go above and beyond. And we have another new person, he's not a staff member, but he's taking care of all of our IT needs, and that's Phil Haskell, and we're very grateful for that. So, one thing I do want to bring your attention to before I close, because I have 0 seconds remaining, is that CADY is part of our Central New Hampshire Health Partnership, and we are in the process of doing a community health needs assessment. You have it in your file, in your packet. If at some point today, if you live in our immediate region, we would be greatly appreciative if you would fill that out. And on your way out today, Christy and Nora will be at the door, the exit to the building. If you hand them a completed survey, they're going to hand you a gift certificate to the Launch Kids Frosty Scoops, free ice cream. Take a few minutes, please. Thank you. Now I'm going to get on with the program before Ann flashes another sign at me. It's Congresswoman Annie Kuster, and she went to Washington in 2013, determined to make a change and to move beyond gridlock. She has worked across the aisle to get things done for her constituents, and we're grateful for that. She's a strong advocate for the issues that matter most to us, including mental health and substance use disorders. She continues to host roundtables across the state, which I've had the privilege of participating in, on the opioid crisis to gain feedback from her constituents and bring her constituents to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress, as she has with our own Susan Messenger 2 times, I believe. She was born and raised in Concord, New Hampshire. She lives with her husband, Brad, and they are raising 2 sons, Zach and Travis. It's an honor always to have Annie with us, as she is one of the most knowledgeable people, I think, on the ground or on the Hill about this issue. And please help me welcome Congresswoman Annie Kuster.
Good morning, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be back here. I just want to thank all of you. Deb's introduction about the just say yes is the attitude that we need. I feel as though you've been at this longer than almost anybody in the state, and we really appreciate the guidance and the just you being out front of this really is helping other communities to come together. You're the ones that showed us the way with collaboration and bringing our law enforcement to the table, our educators, our community leaders, and our students and youth, and that's what we really need to do. I feel as though each month that goes by, our response is getting better and better across the state, and yet the threat is getting worse and worse. And I think, we made the leap in our minds from, first of all, that heroin was so pervasive in our community, and then we all learned about fentanyl and what that was, and then last week to have 6 deaths with this carfentanil and the risk now to our law enforcement. And just trying to get our brains around, elephant tranquilizer and being 100 times stronger than anything. So we are all at risk, honestly, our youth, our communities, our families, and it's going to take every single person to step up and really become educated and learn, and CADY does such an amazing job. Obviously, I concur with everything that you've said about prevention, and I'm looking up at that chart, and I remember I spent quite a bit of time several years ago going around the state talking to schools and youth about alcohol and the statistics of use, and starting for every year that a young person starts alcohol, they have a much greater chance of having a lifelong problem. And I think that's true for any kind of addiction, for drugs as well. We've had some pretty remarkable research coming out just recently, and I want to share this with you because I do agree with Senator Shaheen in the comments that she's made that It doesn't start with opioids or heroin. It starts before that. But this is a new study that just came out in March, and it was reported this week from the Food and Drug Administration that is coming to the table on the issue of opioid addiction. For every person, and I think I've shared these statistics with you before, that there are 60,000 surgeries a year in the country. 99% of people that have surgery are prescribed opioid medication. And what we've just learned now, for a person who uses opioid medication for 1 day, 6% will still be using opioids 1 year later. For a person that uses opioid medication for 30 days, 35% will still be using opioid medication 1 year later. And what we've learned is that 1 in 15 of the 99% that are prescribed opioids will become a chronic user of opioid medication. And for some people, and I don't want to deny chronic pain, and it's a very complicated subject to help people to deal with chronic pain, but one of the directions that I've been taking is alternative pain remedies and trying to educate my colleagues in Congress. I think you all know that we started, actually Mr. Ginta and I started a bipartisan task force to combat the heroin epidemic. And I've continued with that. We now have over 85 members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, working together, trying to tackle all different aspects, from education and prevention, treatment and increasing access to treatment, and then the recognition of lifelong recovery for most people. And we had a hearing just last week about these synthetics, about the fentanyl, carfentanil, and the what's coming in, the shipments from China actually of the ingredients coming into our country, and the DEA's difficulty trying to stay ahead. There are literally, I've not heard this expression before, criminal chemists. And criminal chemists are the people that are trying to stay one step ahead of the schedules that the DEA has for the substances that are illegal. And they change just a little bit of the chemical makeup, and they're able to stay ahead of this. So we will be introducing bipartisan legislation. But I've been hearing from law enforcement, literally they are breaking up. We used to worry about the meth houses. They've now had breaking up, walking into a house with a dozen people and 30 blenders going. And trust me, these people are not chemists. They are not approved for making medication in any way, shape, or form. So our group is going to be working with law enforcement and with the DEA to make sure that our federal laws stay ahead and give you the tools for interdiction, and to make sure you can stay on top of that. I've got so many notes and so many things to try to tell you, and I want to be brief in my time, but I do have one reading assignment that I highly, highly recommend. If you have not seen this book, please go out and get your hands on it, and it's called Dreamland. And I'll say it again, Dreamland, so you can write it down. It is an extraordinary book. It's a very deep dive by a journalist into both aspects of this. One, on the side of the pharmaceuticals and how this came about, that these medications are so ubiquitous in our life and so addictive for some people. And I'm not blaming the medical community. They do not have the research to know of their patients which ones will use these medications fine, use them for a few days, get relief from their pain after surgery, and never go back to it, and which ones use it and never, their lives are off track from there on. They're just, I've talked to so many people in recovery saying, this was the first time I felt normal. This was the first time. There's something about the chemical imbalance in the brain that we just don't know enough about. But this book also does a deep dive in terms of where the drugs are coming from, how they're coming into rural America. and just spreading out, starting down in Ohio and Appalachia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, then moved up Pennsylvania, New York, and then up into New England. And one of the briefings that we had was this incredible time series of maps, just watching the arrests, watching the drugs coming into New England, up 91 where Keene and Newport and Claremont were hit very hard early, and then up 93 coming this way, and now up 95 all the way up into Maine. I do want to tell you about alternative pain management and the research that's going on. We've got a big conference on Tuesday at Dartmouth if anybody's interested in this subject. Some of the cutting edge research is being done both at Dartmouth Medical School and at our VA in White River Junction. I serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and we have legislation about alternative pain management so that we can start to give people relief from pain without just always automatically going to the opioid medications. And we'd love, I can get you more information on that. We're working with the drug courts, and you're to be commended in Grafton County for the wonderful success that you've had. That's now spreading across the state. And also just a quick reference to a great program that started in Sullivan County and is now moving to Merrimack County House of Corrections. I just toured there last week with Ross Cunningham. But this is treatment in-house during incarceration and then wraparound services for a whole year. I remember the young man, I don't know if he's here, the policeman from Laconia who started the incredible program there, but that wraparound holding people together after their initial recovery, making sure that they have the supports they need to be successful in their recovery long term. We're working on expanding beds and access all across the state. I'm leaving from here to go up to Friendship House in Bethlehem. We've got some great new developments on that expansion, and I think that'll be very helpful in this region. And we're continuing to work with Val Scarborough and others in here to get the housing for the veterans in Plymouth, and hopefully that will have some services as well. So I'm getting the sign to wrap up. I've got so much more to tell you, but the bottom line is just please know that all of us in the federal delegation are working very, very hard on this. We had great results last year with the passage of CARA, with the $1 billion in funding at the end of the year, and we're going to continue to work. And I'll leave you with one positive note. We were dismayed that the Office of National Drug Control Policy had been zeroed out in the budget, and the governor had invited Secretary Price from Health and Human Services to New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, and we descended upon him. And the good news is that that funding is back in the budget. In this budget cycle, but please reach out to your federal delegation, and if you have friends and neighbors that you stay in touch with in other states, it's critically important right now as the budget season, and we've got to make sure that you get the funding you need for all aspects of this. But thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and thank
you, Dr. Very nice, Annie. Thank you so much. It's my honor to introduce the Governor of New Hampshire. Governor Christopher Sununu is serving his first term as governor of the state. He is currently the youngest governor in the country. Governor Sununu served 3 terms on the New Hampshire Executive Council. The 5-member Executive Council provides unique oversight of the state's executive branch, sharing many of the same powers as the governor. Governor Sununu grew up in Salem. He graduated from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with a BS in Civil Environmental Engineering, and worked for 10 years cleaning up hazardous waste sites. In 1998, Governor Sununu completed a 5-month through hike of the Appalachian Trail from Maine to Georgia. Wow, that's awesome. The governor lives in Newfields with his wife Valerie and their 3 children, Calvin, Edie, and Leo. Please help me welcome Governor of New Hampshire, Christopher Sununu.
Plymouth, we relax. I made the joke earlier, I knew Alex Ray wasn't wearing his tie, so I wasn't going to. North, Plymouth and North, we don't wear tie. Well, it is absolutely great to be here. I'm just looking around the room. This is a heck of a crowd. It really is. And Congresswoman Kuster, wonderful words. And it's great to have you here because it is an important issue. It is a very important issue. I want to start with a couple different things. I'm actually going to start with what we were doing this morning. So this morning I sat in a great meeting with a lot of the businesses locally right here in Plymouth. And we talk about a lot of different things, driving business, driving workforce, some of the issues that we're talking about. You know, but when we talk about this opioid crisis, we talk about the impact of individuals, we talk about the 500, just shy of 500 people a year that we're losing, right? That's 500 families that are getting torn apart. There's tens of thousands more that are dealing with this crisis in terms of recovery and addiction and kind of working their way out. We talk about what's going on the interdiction side. This isn't just the same drug we're seeing over and over again. It's in many ways, it's advancing in a very negative way. Now we see carfentanil. Right? I think we have six maybe confirmed deaths of carfentanil. You know, somebody put the other day, someone put a thing of Morton salt on the table. Boom. That is enough carfentanil to kill every person in New Hampshire and Vermont combined. Right? One thing of Morton salt. Think about that. And that is what is out there right now. That's the severity of what we're dealing with. It isn't just an epidemic. It's something we've never even seen before. I really don't consider what we're dealing with, the drug crisis, with what we saw years ago, everything with marijuana and cocaine, and it's just a whole new ballgame of death. We're not dealing drugs. These people are dealing death. And I have a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. I have a 4-year-old too. But let me tell you, as a parent, I've sat there with my wife and pretty much on a daily basis having some pretty tough conversations with my kids. My son is great, but I know the drug dealers will get to him pretty soon. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. So it scares the heck out of me. So people wonder why I'm so dang passionate about it. A, we have to be, and B, it hits us all. It really affects everyone. This isn't about the inner city of Manchester, right? It's everywhere. It is in Plymouth. It is in the small town of Newfields where I'm from. It's in every single community, and there's very few people in the state it hasn't touched, if not directly, then indirectly. So to see the folks in this room is a great example of the priority the folks in this state are taking to it. So what are we doing? Where are we going? What is the plan? I think that's where we have to get. I think let me say this, about the last 18 months, I think New Hampshire has become a state with dealing with this issue to leading on this issue in virtually every way. I mean, we really have done some amazing things in this state. And as governor, I've only been governor about almost 6 months now. Seems like a lifetime. Holy cow. Oh my goodness. But we're getting through a budget process. Luckily that'll be done soon, I think. But you know, it's only been about 5 months, but I've had the opportunity to travel a lot to other states. I've worked a lot with, to be honest, we work with the Trump administration closely because that's actually a good thing, because there's a lot we need out of the Trump administration. We need to have communication there. We need to have a line into that organization. Chris Christie, I think the benefit we have of being the first in the nation primary is both Donald Trump himself, Chris Christie, who is now essentially the drug czar, they don't use that term anymore, but really running a lot of the opioid task force across the country. These folks were here on the ground, firsthand, and saw very, very clearly. You know, they walked the streets with Chief Willard in Manchester. They sat down with a lot of the sheriffs here and talked about it. So that's, in a way, that's a good thing because they've seen it and we know we're going to get a lot of attention. But we got to have the communication. We got to stay right on top of it. You know, we talk a lot about the prevention side. I'm a big believer in the prevention side. I was a little aggressive with my negativity on the prevention side. We do okay in prevention. I was probably a little negative. I was trying to get some people's attention, and the good news is I did, which was great. I am a huge believer, and I'm passionate because my son and daughter went through the DARE program in their public elementary school. I sat around with a bunch of parents, not as the governor or the executive counselor, a bunch of parents about a year and a half ago going, what was that? It wasn't quite what we expected or up to par. My son, they talked about smoking and drinking for one day in the beginning of the year and one day in the end of the year. Did they mention opioids? Did they mention fentanyl? Did they mention carfentanil? Nothing. Nothing. And I said, that's unacceptable. We got to bring it to the next level. We got to basically create a baseline of standards. If we keep dealing with this drug crisis the same way that we've dealt with the last 20 years, we are not appreciating the evolution that it has taken. The drug dealers have changed their models, they've changed their product, the addiction has changed, everything has changed. So we have to be responsive on our side and change what our approach is. I see you have some students over here. If you're not students, you look great. Well, one of my approaches is to say, okay, I'm 42, I'm the youngest governor in the country. I make the joke, Democrats always remind me of that. He's young and foolish, But one thing I do appreciate me coming out of Waterville Valley is not just the millennial generation and having kids of my own. I don't know, and in most, I think 90% of this room has to accept you don't truly know what is going to impact a student, whether it be at college age, high school age, or elementary school, in terms of messaging and how we should put it out there. We have to own that and say, okay, how do we redesign a prevention program? Go ask them. Go ask them what is going to impact them. We did a great thing, and I don't know if it's been brought up. I see John Delina in the audience. John Delina runs the DEA for us here in New Hampshire. An absolute superstar we have in the room with John Delina. And this is a great example, I think, of not just the DEA, but state police, local law enforcement, all coming together, working together, not just on the enforcement side, but also saying, okay, everyone can't live in a silo. Enforcement has to work with prevention. Prevention has to work with recovery. Recovery has to work with treatment. We all have to take ownership of each other's priorities a little bit. We have our specialties, but we all have to understand how each of the other puzzle pieces is working. So John was instrumental with a couple other folks putting together a panel discussion on WMUR maybe 2 weeks ago. And the discussion was Special Agent Delina, myself, a few others on one side, and students coming in different groups. 3 or 4, 5 different groups coming in and just saying, them telling us what we needed to do. It was awesome. And one of the biggest takeaways, it was on MUR, and it was great. This young man said, look, I know we're on TV, I don't mean to be rude, but we don't watch TV. We don't. They said, you've been talking about this opioid crisis for, I guess, for like a year and a half. I just found out about 6 months ago. It's like, I don't watch TV. I watch my device. Right? I'm on YouTube, I'm on Hulu, I'm on Vudu, I'm on websites, and I'm not on websites necessarily on a computer, I'm on my device. So they said, if you want to have a strong messaging campaign, talk to us the way we're listening, right? And talk to us in a way that the information is going to be received. I make the joke sometimes, but it's dead true that the person that did the DARE program in my kid's school, no offense to those in the room, it was a 65-year-old gray-haired guy, knew a lot about prevention, very passionate, came in, gave his time, did a great presentation. Do you think a 6th grader is listening to that guy? No, he's not. We need more peer-to-peer messaging, right? Because they know how to talk to each other. They know what's going to get through. And so it's just these little things, right? You kind of take these things for granted. But when you add these things up, if we do it the right way, that's how we can really communicate. They can help design the program for us. They can help figure out how to message it for us, and they can help be the messengers for us. And that's how we're going to deal with this issue in the long term. And we have to think long term because we're going to be dealing with it for a long time. Recovery is a lifelong process for those in recovery, right? We have to appreciate that. You're not going to win this drug war overnight. I do believe it's winnable. I'm one of the few folks that believes that you can win it. But I'm also appreciative that there will be something else down the road, right? There will be the next fight and the next fight and the next fight. So we have to get ahead of the game here. In New Hampshire, in traveling the country, I can tell you we are way ahead of the game. We are, even from some of our surrounding states. They don't have the synergies on the law enforcement side that we do. They don't have prevention folks working directly with law enforcement. When you have the federal DEA and state police going right into a classroom to work with the prevention folks to help design that program, that's very, we think it's obvious, but it's not. So I think we're doing some great stuff here. On the recovery side of things, I think there was some, to be blunt, I think there were some political barriers in there. Not Republican, Democrat, don't get me wrong. But I think there was some, well, where's the money going to go? Everyone's always fighting for the dollars, right? I have no patience for that. I really have no patience for that whatsoever. I put everyone in the recovery world in the same room. You have your model, you have your model, you have your model. We're all going to play together because those models work for different people in different ways. And we're going to support all of them, right? We're not going to just focus all the money here and all the efforts there. We're going to get everyone in the same room and we're going to understand that we are in this together. And either this rising tide floats all boats or we are sinking. And I think I personally think it's been received pretty well. Sometimes you got to force things, together to happen. But you do it with a smile. You do it with some patience. And I think we're making some great progress there. On the treatment side, Here's my problem with the one area where I think we missed the boat a bit also on treatment. We have a lot of rules and regulations in this state. We talk about how the rules and regulations affect business. We talk about how they affect the Department of Labor and Environmental Services, and those are difficulties. And I've been very aggressive about saying we are going to wipe a lot of those rules and regs right off the books, because live free or die has to be more than just something on our license plate. Right? We are ranked 37th. This is more business focused, but we are ranked 37th in the country in terms of how our state rules and regulations negatively impact business. That is not the live free or die spirit, right? Let's understand that and go after it. So been going after it in terms of the business aspects, but it's really across the board. So one thing I noticed is when you're trying to permit a new recovery center, you're trying to permit a new treatment center, you're trying to license and bring MLADACs and some of the specialists into the state, we've made it very cumbersome to bring in the specialists. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. We are at ground zero of the biggest drug crisis this country has ever faced, and we're making it difficult for people to get certified to help other people. People are saying, I want to help, and we're saying, yeah, but go through this cumbersome process. You know what they're saying? Okay, I'll go to another state. You guys don't want to be part of it. Well, go somewhere else, right? It's a free market. So we have to pay those people appropriately. We have to streamline it. We have to provide reciprocity when we can from folks coming to other states. So this is where the rules and regulations have really bungled us up a little bit. Permitting. We have treatment centers that want to get permitted. A lot of them in the southern part of the state, I'm just thinking of a couple that we've been working with, both on the local side and the state side, they're getting tied up for months, like 9 to 18 months. In other states, you can probably get those same permits in about 2 to 3 months, right? They've kind of greenlit a lot of projects down there, really broken down and a lot of streamlining of a lot of those projects because they know how important they are. We have to do the same thing here. So there's a lot we can do and we can affect, and I think what you're going to see, and I think what we've already seen over the past few months, is we've kind of taken a really good program and we want to get to that gold level standard. And again, by doing that, by bringing folks like yourself in, keeping everybody involved, keeping the messaging constant, and constant in terms of we don't give up the drumbeat, but also understand that over time we're going to have to evolve it. I'm an engineer. I'm all about knowing that you never design the system perfect the first time, right? You don't. And in some ways, no system ever gets perfect. So you constantly have to keep going back and tweaking it and tweaking it. So that's to the elected officials in the room and to the elected officials in Conklin. That's the message. Don't think you got it right. Constantly go back, review. What are the metrics we're going to use? What are the standards we're going to have? Are those standards getting in the way of the messaging? Because sometimes the standards get too bogged up and complicated. Sometimes we have to simplify those. So I can't do it all myself, Lord knows. I am not an expert in this world. I'm really not. I think the Senate and the House have done some great work. They've really made this a priority, but we are not experts in the four walls of the State House. We do not have all the answers. We really don't. The answers we have are going to come from this room, from folks like yourself that are on the front lines of this issue. Whether it's the young people helping us design our prevention programs, folks in the recovery world saying, you know what, we tried X, Y, and Z, but only 2 of these things worked, and we're seeing another model in another state work. Great, bring that to us. Bring it in. Bring it in. We want to soak up all the information we can, and I think we're leading in a way that allows that stuff to get disseminated and created and produced in a very, very aggressive and proactive way. Breaking down those rules and regulations, getting rid of a lot of the cumbersome processes, it's all about the individuals. Right? We talk a lot about statistics in this state. These are not statistics. These are individuals. These are families. These are lives. When we talk about how it affects our workforce. The thing I'm going to leave you with, because I don't want to go over my time. I'm number 7 of 8 kids, and if I ever stop talking, no one paid attention to me for like 4 months. I tend to go on a little bit. But one really, for those of you who may not have seen it, there was an economic impact report done in the past couple of weeks, and it basically said the economic impact of the opioid crisis is about $2.5 billion in this state per year. $2.5 billion in little old New Hampshire. But one of the most amazing statistics there was that the economic impact in terms of healthcare was about $350 million, and the economic impact to the workforce was about $1.6 billion. 5 times the impact, right? So if you just want to look at the dollars and cents of this, and we have a workforce problem in the state. We don't have enough young and talented workers in the state. Actually, we do, but they're sidelined. These are great, able-bodied working adults that are hesitant to get back into the workforce field. So one idea we have is to create recovery-friendly workplaces, because there are workplaces that are very recovery-friendly that want people in recovery to come on in. But in someone in recovery, you want to know that you're going to be well received, so to say. You're going to be supported, you're going to be trained. So we're working on a system where maybe we can certify different businesses as recovery friendly. These are just the types of ideas we're exploring now to make sure that we're addressing it. This crisis impacts all of our lives in virtually every different way. Every different way. If we're aggressive about it, if you folks are in this room, you understand it, carry the message out of this room. Carry the message to those who don't know. Carry the message to those who aren't talking about it. They think it's not going to affect their family. It will affect their family in one way or another eventually. If we do that, we stay positive, we stay on it, you keep us accountable, you keep us moving forward in Concord. I don't mean to be the eternal optimist, but I just think there are great things ahead for us, and we do it by working together. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Don't you just love his passion and commitment? It's so exciting to see. Thank you, Governor Sununu. Very nicely done. I also would like to thank, I spent 3 terms in the New Hampshire House, and I know something about the leadership and what that requires. And we do have Speaker of the House, Sean Jasper, with us, and I want to thank you very much, Mrs. Speaker, for leading the way through the New Hampshire House towards solutions on this very complicated issue. So thank you. And I didn't realize it until the governor pointed out that Special Agent from the DEA, John Delina, is with us. So I think we missed recognizing you earlier. So thank you, Governor, and thank you, John, for the great work you're doing on the field. Now we're going to turn to our keynote speaker, Kevin Sabet, and he has been described by NBC as the prodigy of drug politics and policy. Dr. Sabet is an author, consultant, and former advisor to 3 U.S. presidential administrations. He currently serves as the president and CEO of the SAM Project, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, Preventing Another Big Tobacco, which he co-founded with former Congressman Patrick Kennedy in 2013. Sabet is the only drug policy staffer to have ever served as a political appointee in both Democrat and Republican administrations. I love that. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Kevin. He is a policy consultant to numerous domestic and international organizations, including the United Nations and other governmental and non-governmental organizations. He is also the recipient of several prestigious awards, including a Global Drug Prevention Award. Please help me welcome Dr. Kevin Sabet.
Thank you, Deb, for that very kind introduction. It was exactly the way we practice it outside. No, but really, for everyone here, I'm such a fan of all the work you guys are doing. You have such great resources in the state, amazing political leadership from both sides of the aisle, and I really think that Governor Sununu, as well as the Congresswoman and our senators here, deserve a round of applause for their leadership on this issue. It's a complex and emotional issue, which is, it's not that complex and emotional aren't exactly the issues that every politician want to handle these days. And so we have to hand it to them for doing that. And folks here, law enforcement, thank you for your work. And Jay, my friend here, who's the head of the New England HIDA, also our representatives from DEA. I think we're very happy about the president's budget request that fully funds HIDA and DEA, actually increasing funding for those programs, as well as our prevention colleagues, the VFC program, and so many groups in New Hampshire here joined with us to write the president and make sure that his budget reflected some of the discussion on the campaign, where it blew sort of all the issues out of the water on both sides of the aisle that folks wanted to talk about drugs, and that happened right here in New Hampshire, and it happened because of you, because because of groups like New Futures and the leadership that folks like Tim Wark and others have given in the state. So I want to thank everybody for that, and for Katie for having us here today. You know, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, we're talking about opiates. Why is the guy who is, wrote a book called Reefer Sanity, and talks about marijuana, leads a group about marijuana, keynoting a discussion where normally in these kinds of rooms we're talking about opiates? And I think, and I want to thank the board for realizing this clearly, that we cannot divorce these issues from each other. It's very easy and tempting to do that because you're not going to get much pushback when you talk about opiates. I mean, everybody wants, it's baseball, apple pie, and heroin in terms of the discussion today that everyone is on board with. But on marijuana, this is an emotional issue with a lot of very heated passions on both sides, and I can understand that. But the reality is you cannot talk about heroin in this state, opiates in this state, or in any other state in our nation without discussing alcohol, tobacco, and absolutely marijuana. And right now, we are living at a time during an intense national debate on marijuana, and it's really in our hands about where we're going to go on this. By the way, I do not think it's inevitable. I don't really believe the polls that say 60% of Americans want this. If you ask Americans, do you want a pot shop next to your kid's school? They're going to say no. And that's what it is in Colorado. We're going to talk about the data. If you ask them, do you think legalization should allow edibles, gummy bears, cookies, candy bars, chocolate bars, cakes? They would say no. If you ask them a really nice question, do you think we should regulate and get tax revenue for adults 21 and over? That sounds, for most people, they're not thinking about this issue. Yeah, maybe that sounds good. But the polling has driven this. The reality is the consequences we're already feeling in states like Colorado should be a warning sign for states like New Hampshire. And, sometimes that means tough political compromises. I know the discussion recently on decriminalization was a difficult one. And I do want to commend the folks at New Futures for pushing that forward, and I think it's an evolving process. It may not have been a perfect law. Let's talk about it and let's hear from law enforcement and other colleagues in a year or so about what holes need to be filled, and let's work together on that. Nobody wants to throw people in prison for using marijuana, but at the same time, this has been set up as a false dichotomy. You either got to throw people in prison or you have to legalize pot. Which one do you want? And if you legalize it, you get all this tax money coming from the sky. And this is a false deal that's been operated. By the way, speaking of tax money falling from the sky, how are you all doing with giving the tax revenue from alcohol and tobacco? Your alcohol treatment fully funded here in the state? You're good to go? How about tobacco? Fully funded? Schools, top of the nation? I don't want to, talk about it. But let's think about the reality of tax revenue, folks. It's tempting to say, look at all this money we got. We got $100 million last year in Colorado. My question to someone when they say that is, great, how much did it cost you? They don't have an answer. Well, we haven't done that study yet. Not sure. That's like having a business say, I sold $100,000 in t-shirts last year. Awesome. But how much did it cost you to do that? $500,000. Probably a bad deal. And we're forgetting the other side of the ledger. And then not just the financial cost, the human cost that we talked about. The drug drivers. Anyone that says marijuana doesn't kill, I'd like them to talk to the thousands of families that are victims every year from people impaired on marijuana. People that have literally, write emails saying, Kevin, you're wrong. I'm a better driver when I'm high. I go 30 miles an hour in a 70 mile per hour zone. Or the other day I said, Kevin, you're wrong. It says marijuana is not addictive. And I said, great, how do you know that? Well, I can speak from experience. I use it every day. Not addictive. Folks, there's a delusion here. There's a delusion with marijuana. And I don't know what it is, because do you ever see people with heroin use disorders protesting for their right to use heroin up on the Capitol? I never see that. I never see cocaine users saying, this is my right. I never see alcoholics saying, make my alcohol cheaper. Maybe the industry does, but the users don't. Something about marijuana, and the head of NIH, I stumped him. I'm so excited. This is really smart, Francis Collins, and Nora Volkow, head of NIDA. You can never stump her, but I stumped him with this question. What is it about marijuana that is this, it turns into this crusade, religion, devotion, love affair? I don't think I'm exaggerating when I give those descriptions. And this it's just, and that's why when, I'm so happy and proud of our affiliate, Sam Vermont, who fought and won with law enforcement and the Pediatric Association, all the medical groups in your neighboring state of Vermont. Can we give Governor Scott He stood up for what was right and said, I'm not going to be bullied into this. And he was hearing from the billion-dollar lobby from around the country, sending letters. And let's just get down to brass tacks, folks. This is about one thing and one thing only, the advocates. It's about one thing, that's money. It's about a small number of them who want to get really rich. Can we just be honest about it? If I have to hear that this is about social justice, really? How's alcohol doing with social justice? We have liquor stores 8 times as many in poorer neighborhoods in our country than in upper class neighborhoods. We have more issues with our legal drugs. And by the way, that other legal class of drugs, opiates, that's pushed by an industry wanting to get rich, saying it was medicine, and it was not addictive. That kind of sounds familiar. How's that going? Are we having fun yet? So let's talk, and then the other reality, which is, if you talk to every single medical association and scientific group out there, they are saying, at the very least, please slow down. This is a monumental decision about legalization, and you're rushing like a freight train. And this isn't good. People say, well, alcohol is legal. Well, wait a minute. Alcohol is used by 70% of Americans, and it's been used since before the Old Testament, we think, 5,000 years. Whether you like it or not, it's in our culture. It produces a lot of harms, but anyway, it's in our culture, and it sort of is here. We now have it in our hands now. We don't have to go back 5,000, wish we were around 5,000 years ago, to decide whether or not to have marijuana be, I'm not saying it's not already here, of course it is, but be normalized, promoted, accepted. And to me, it makes no sense when you think about tobacco. Look at tobacco today. I don't even know where you can smoke these days legally. I mean, we have pushed it out because we said, oh my gosh, we were lied to by an industry for a century. They said tobacco was not addictive. They said it doesn't cause lung cancer. They said that, oh yeah, we have tobacco, chewing gum and candy cigarettes, but it's really only aimed for adults. Take our word for it. Cherry cola Marlboros is what every adult really wants to chew on. I mean, they would say these kinds of things. And we believe them. Shame on us. We believe them. Do you know when the first research about tobacco and lung cancer was actually established? Anybody can guess a decade? 60s is whatever. I said 60s when I was asked that because that's the educated answer, because that's when we sort of increased awareness. Surgeon General had a report in the 60s, bombshell report, and said, oh my gosh, it does cause. No, it was actually the 1920s. And it took our country so long to realize we were doomed. And I can't imagine we want to do that again. And I also can't imagine the hypocrisy when we say, no, you can't smoke, smokers are evil, smoking is evil, no, not happening, big tobacco, oh my God, shame on them. Oh, marijuana, sure, here we go, roll up the red carpet, no problem. And marijuana, a drug unlike tobacco, that kills people on the roads, and that is one of the reasons why you're late to school, you're late to work, can't operate a forklift, you're impaired, folks. Now, say what you want about smoking, it kills 500,000 people a year. We don't want to be promoting it by any means. But it kills them indirectly through lung cancer. It does not impair you. It doesn't reduce IQ, the studies we're going to talk about a little bit later. It doesn't reduce motivation. It doesn't increase your chance to get in an accident either at work or at home, on the roads. And so why we would be doing that for smoking cigarettes, and then saying, oh no, but for marijuana it's about social justice and freedom, makes no sense. Now, I don't care if you're smoking a joint. If you're an adult once a year, in your birthday, you decide to smoke a joint instead of drink wine or something. That's not what this is about. It's not about we've already decriminalized. It's not about that. It's about an industry that wants to target young people. And every time they say it's about individual users, I say, great. Will you change your legalization bill so that it's just about personal possession for adults? Well, no, we need to regulate it and get it into stores. And because that's how they make money. And that really is the reality of it. So I think I've said my whole presentation. I just walk off now. I get carried away because I just can't believe that in this discussion about opiates and the wounds from tobacco. I mean, we have some young people here today. Believe it or not, Your parents' generation thought it was a good idea to have people smoke 40,000 feet in the air in a metal bird with wings already dead off. They thought it was a good idea. Can you believe it? They also thought it was a good idea that kids should be in restaurants and where they would say smoking or non-smoking section. That was a real thing. A smoking section was a real thing. I mean, they also thought it was a good idea to have a camel with a cigarette on the end of it in a cartoon character plastered around buildings. It's crazy. And yet, here we are having this discussion about marijuana again. So, I do think it's new things about. Let's look at some of the stats here. We get carried away with, look, the opiate epidemic, it's the biggest drug epidemic of our nation's history. But it does not start, and I think we alluded to today, it doesn't start with a 14-year-old who decides to use drugs for the first time, injects himself with heroin, and then has an overdose. It doesn't work that way. The opiate epidemic is driven mainly by folks in their 30s and 40s, overdosed for the 9th time, never got the help that they needed or did, and it wasn't enough. Didn't have, couldn't get reversed, and then this happened. But it was a trajectory that started a lot earlier. Now, the good news is that the average 12th grade alcohol use is down in this country by 16%. That's good. In the last 10 years, 12th grade use. Every drug except marijuana, so heroin, the opiates, cocaine, believe it or not, and this is going to shock you because we think about the opiate epidemic, is down 23% initiation. That's interesting. And it tells us again that this is about a complex disorder that is often intermingled with a lot of other things going on and a lot of other drugs. The opiate overdoses, this is not about one drug, even at the time. This is about multiple things going on, multiple drugs, multiple disorders. The only drug to be going up in this country in the last 10 years is marijuana. By 12th graders, it's up 12%. In stats, big stats class, if you see everything in one category going down and one thing going up, what is that reason? I think it's the free advertising that both drug dealers and legal pot shops are getting from this normalization of marijuana. And, I gotta hand it to them, they're very shrewd. I mean, if you Google is marijuana addictive, they funded the top 100 websites to tell you that it's not. I mean, it's incredible. And then you ask, well, all right, well, where do you get your information that marijuana is not addictive or marijuana is harmless? And it's like, oh yeah, I don't believe that. Government science, that's a conspiracy. NIH, forget about it. I mean, this is what a lot of kids tell me. Like, no, I go on Wikipedia and it's a really unbiased source. Or I go on Reddit and there's 50 people who've created a subgroup on Reddit that use marijuana, and so they're able to talk about it from experience. That is substituted for the science here, and the industry knows it, and they're thriving off of it. And by the way, it's free advertising for drug dealers. And let's be honest here, the drug dealers haven't left Colorado en masse. If anything, they've come to Colorado. It's not like a drug dealer says, oh, you've legalized pot, cool, I'm going to go to dental school now, I'm done. They're involved in so many other things, and they're undercutting the legal price. Why would you want to pay 30% tax on the marijuana you've been getting anyway? And with very, very little consequence in the black market for marijuana. And so that's why we started SAM. We're working with all kinds of medical and health groups around the country. And these are it's funny, when we started, and it was with Patrick Kennedy on the left, David Frum on the right, and bipartisan group. And when we went to these medical groups, a lot of them said, Kevin, we've already kind of done the marijuana thing. We have a really well-written 477-page report in Times Roman 8 font. Hasn't everybody read that? That's all the science. I'm like, no. They're Googling, is marijuana safe? And this is a huge, the average reading for a 16-year-old, let alone just the average American, isn't exactly the Lancet Psychiatry Journal. It's like, that is not what's going on. And so the amount of misinformation is really, really, really incredible. So there is this false dichotomy in my mind that says, oh my gosh, our prisons are just full of pot users. And so if we just ended this, we would get, first of all, we have a lot of law enforcement here. Can you please tell me, maybe they can tell us, raise their hand if your prisons are spilling over with people whose only crime is possessing a few joints. Everybody work? Come on, I'm taking my chances here. No, I got a big fat no, which is what I get everywhere. Folks, yeah, exactly. You know, this is a huge myth. Now, there are arrest records, there's things like that. Fine, we can reform certain things. We don't want to, you know, give a kid, a 17-year-old, an arrest record for pops so they can't get housing later in life or whatever, a job. Okay, fine, we can reform those things. But we don't need to legalize in order to do that. It's been set up to us with us as a false dichotomy. When I ask people what they think the average drug dealer looks like, for all drugs today, this image isn't exactly the image that people think about. And some people think this guy kind of looks like me. I get a little offended by that. But anyway, if you're thinking that. But these guys are, I don't know, the governor's like, he's better looking. Why do you get offended by that? This is about, these guys are literally, these are just some of them, and they're not the only ones. It's an example. They're not. They're the Yale MBAs, folks. They are the people with $1 billion business plan who went to Wharton, a business school or whatever. They are in it to make money, and they're not, by the way, using marijuana. They're kind of like, I got to get up and go to work. I'm trying to make money off it. We want you to use it. I'm not want to use it. That's literally what is going on here. And this is what scares me. If it was, I went to Berkeley, undergrad in California, and you can tell I was a really popular guy there, right? My dude. It's fun to stand out, kids, I promise. And when I went, there are the hippies there, and they're talking about Vietnam, and they're smoking their joint, and whatever. If they were the ones pushing legalization, we could rest a little bit on. It would take some time to get some things done. Marijuana slows your brain down, by the way. It really does. That's why it's bad for driving, your reaction reflex. It's true. It kind of slows you down. It does. That's why in sports, I always wanted our opponents, they said, well, we can't use marijuana. I wish we didn't have that policy. I wanted the opposing team to be using marijuana. It was great for us. But the reality is, it's not about the hippies anymore. I kind of wish it was. I wish it was sort of this. It's not. It's about these guys. These kinds of guys who are here to make money. It's the tobacco executives of our day. And they're in Wall Street. They're from Silicon Valley. You should see who funded the California Initiative. Who was the main funder? The founder of Napster and co-founder of Facebook. Why would he put $10 million of his own money into a league just because I don't think anyone likes pot that much. I think it's called an investment, right? And that is what really concerns me. The billboards in Colorado, the event sponsorship, the coupon. This is the ski resort there. It said, show your ski pass and receive a $1 joint. I'm a really bad skier anyway. We're going to, my class and my family, we're going to Utah. They're nice there. We're not going to Colorado. On a ski lift and the things that are going on, it's scary actually. And it's about promotion. It's commercialization. It's not legalization. That's a very pretty word. So is regulation. And it's not about any of that. It's really about commercialization and promotion. So I agree. Newsweek had a thing, Big Tobacco is back. I tend to agree with them. The head of the marijuana group that's funding all of the legalization in Vermont and everywhere else, he is now working with the tobacco industry. He's asking them, what do you want? Tell us what you want. How can we erode the tobacco laws that you really don't want to be on the books anyway? And let's work together. Of course they should work together. They both have a product that comes from a plant that is processed and rolled into a cigarette. It's the same thing. And of course they're going to work together. And by the way, it's just a plant. I know you've probably heard that one before. That's what I had someone else the other day say, yeah, you're right, it's a plant. It's just a plant. How bad can it be? Plants are good, and one of them, plants come from God. Are you anti-God? So we asked, you think you get hard questions, Governor? And I said, no, I'm not anti-God, but poison ivy is a plant too. I said, yeah, no, marijuana is natural. So are sharks. I want nothing to do with it. And by the way, it's not natural. We have actually, if you really even take that, we have totally manipulated the marijuana plant. It's actually not natural at all. We have manipulated it to increase THC in ways that, we never would have thought. So we have a whole campaign. It's called Are We Sure? You can actually see it on arewesure.net. We only launched it in Vermont and Rhode Island. But the issue is, let's not be fooled by big tobacco again. Because that's really what this is about. And we do need to separate issues. There is an issue difference between decrim, medical, and legalization. I don't have time to dwell on all of this, but you know, the legalization groups love to conflate all of these. So they love to bring the kid in the wheelchair and say, the kid has epilepsy, so we need to legalize marijuana. Well, wait a minute. No, you don't. If there's a component in the plant that might be helpful, great, get it through the FDA. And by the way, they're going through the FDA right now. Good. And, you know, I know this is crazy, but I happen to think that medicine should be, I know I'm going to be like, should be gotten at a pharmacy and prescribed by a doctor. We should know the dosage. I know it's crazy not, we should know the dosage. There should be science behind it. I know it's wild. We should know if it interacts with other medications you're taking. And with all due respect, politicians shouldn't determine what medicine is. I know that's crazy, right? Because, I mean, maybe if they all went to MIT, but I mean, honestly, like, unless you have a Ph.D. in like, pharmacy, I don't care if that's not who determines medicine. So I get that it's been done here, great. Make the best of it, much better. You're doing actually a way better job, I think, in California than all the other states are, to be very clear. But let's also be clear that we want medicines to go through the FDA, unless we want to go back to the snake oil days, pre-1902. That's before we had the FDA. You had all sorts of fun things on the shelf. They were curing everything, by the way. It was amazing, right? Why are we going back to those days? I don't understand. But I do, because it's about compassion. And people just see someone in a wheelchair and say, yes, we want to help them, because we're compassionate people. I get it. But let's try and do it the right way. I think we would benefit from that. We should research schedule. You can research Schedule I drugs. It's a big myth that you can't. It's actually 400 researchers doing it today. So that's good. We should research it. There are medications going through the process. I'm not going to dwell on them. But this is, to me, you know, those kinds of things we should do. But this is not really about connect CBD. CBD is the component in marijuana that people think is helpful for seizures. Folks, the industry doesn't care about CBD. This is about THC. Marijuana has hundreds of components in it. It's a very complex plant. One of them is called THC. That's what binds to the brain. This is basically an illustration of where THC binds. And in the adolescent brain, really not adolescent brain, anyone under 30, your brain is under critical development. It's a critical stage. It's kind of like your brain being under construction. Because your house is under construction. When your house is under construction, it's really an exciting time. It's also kind of scary. It's exciting because you can choose the wallpaper, the appliances, and the flooring. Like, you're doing all these new things. Cool. But if there's a natural disaster, like a tornado, a flood, an earthquake, the house that's not fully under a lot of foundation will tend to fall first. And your brain is kind of the same thing. It's exciting. When you're under 30, you're learning languages. Think about if you had to learn a second language when you were 4 versus when you were 44, right? You're learning to swim, you're learning all these things you're taking in. It's a very, very exciting time. The flip side is it's a very vulnerable time for negative things. Trauma, abuse, this kind of stuff. Drugs, absolutely. And so when these parts of the brain are forming, that reward, memory, judgment, coordination, THC binds to these parts of the brains, and it's, by the way, this is that damn brain stem here is that what produces overdoses, deadly overdoses. There's plenty of people who have marijuana overdoses, but deadly, your heart stopping from taking a drug directly, it's because we have tons of opiate receptors in the brainstem. Thankfully, we don't have cannabinoid receptors in the brainstem. That's a good thing. We don't need that as well. But by the way, that doesn't mean marijuana doesn't kill. I get that question a lot too. Like, Kevin, no one dies from an overdose. No one dies from a tobacco overdose either. Would you ever say tobacco doesn't kill? Of course not. It kills indirectly through lung cancer. And as I was saying, marijuana, actually, when you look at the mental health research, which we're going to talk about, the connection to suicide is scary because of mental health issues, and also the car crashes. So don't tell me marijuana's never killed anybody just because we don't have receptors right here. But this is the addiction center of the brain, reward and memory. This is really the culprit for addiction. And basically, addiction just means you did something that you really liked, and you remembered that you really liked it, so you did it again. That's it. And that's why these drugs are so powerful, and they make us do things we would not normally do. They're hijacking the brain. The brain is super selfish. It is really selfish. It's like, yeah, I get that you have a good relationship with your family, I don't care. I get that you probably don't want to kill people on the road today because you're impaired, I don't care. I get that you have dreams, I don't care. That's the scary part about addiction. And we know THC at least affects these aspects of the brain, and these are kind of the aspects that are a little important when you're like in school. You know, memory is kind of important, judgment's kind of important, and this is why I worry about, especially these high THC products. But I do want to go back to the industry. And this is not just about brain science, this is about money, like I was saying, the economics. This is our chart of the economics of alcohol in this country. What this says is that 10% of Americans consume 75% of all the alcohol consumed in this country. I'll repeat myself. 1 out of 10 Americans drink 7.5 out of 10 drinks. Okay. That's what we call in public policy Pareto's rule, 80-20. It means that 20% of the people are sort of responsible for 80% of the action. It's a well-known economic term. Okay? And it's the same for alcohol. It's about the same. The issue is, folks, if you're in the alcohol industry, who's important to you? The person that drinks a glass of wine with dinner once a week? No. A couple beers on the weekend? Nope. It's the people that are heavily drinking. Yeah, alcoholics. They're really important to you. Now they'll say, no, they're not, and we promote responsibility. If there was if actually everyone enjoyed responsibly, we would have no alcohol industry. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same thing with opiates. Everyone who was prescribed OxyContin didn't abuse them. The vast majority didn't. I mean, I know that's again controversial. The vast majority of people prescribed pills did not abuse them. The small minority were prescribed the majority of pills, and those were the ones that were abusing the majority of pills. It's the same thing. You don't need everyone to do something. And so, you know, this is my worry, is that we have an industry that wants to do that. And so they've increased the THC, the active ingredient. It's up to average 12 to 14% in it. Now that's just in the plant material. That's in like a joint or something. And why have we done? Because we've become better farmers. We've become really good at agriculture. We have learned to manipulate THC. You know, back in the 60s, you didn't want American marijuana. It's the last thing you wanted. You wanted Mexican marijuana, maybe Canadian. Mexican marijuana was called sin semilla, means without seeds. Because the marijuana, and I know nobody here has ever seen marijuana in their entire life, but in the 60s, you were sorting it was like a twig and a leaf and a thing, and it's like, where's the flowering bud that actually gets me? It wasn't even there. Now it's totally different. And it's not just the joint, by the way. I mean, I wish it was just that. I mean, if our problem was only that it's increased 7-fold, it's a bad problem, but we could sort of work through it maybe. That's not the problem. The problems are things like this. 98% THC waxes? You know, our research is on 5% THC. We don't even know what this does to anybody at any time, like scientifically. We just know 5% THC can really mess you up if you use it every day. It does. 98% THC? They call this the crack of marijuana in Colorado. And by the way, they're talking about meth. They're using the same, law enforcement's using the same gear they used to use to dismantle meth houses, to dismantle these butane hash oil, these explosions that are sending hundreds of people to the emergency room and fire and everything else, because it's one of the most dangerous processes to extract THC concentrate from the plant material. And you usually need butane or something to do that. And you know, pot users aren't always the smartest people in the world, and so the stoves are on, the gas is on. You don't want gas on when you're dealing with butane. And this is what's happening. I mean, it's scary. But if you were to tell somebody, you know what, there's this really weird sticky brown substance hanging on the edge of a hot knife, what is that? I don't think they'd say it has anything to do with marijuana. But we are saying that. And also this, I mean, we're dealing with the edibles. The gummies, the sodas, the things that look exactly like regular candy bars, these kinds of things. This is about aggressive marketing. By the way, lots of contaminants. So if anybody who says, you know, I'm a marijuana user and I'm also organic, you should question that. Because there's nothing organic about today's marijuana. I mean, unless they really are growing their own, they know exactly what's going on, but then you should also question them for other reasons. But that, I mean, it's not at all. And they're fighting regulation. I mean, this is a hilarious thing. They're like, we want to regulate it. Okay, so it passes in Colorado. We sit down with them, we say, all right, well, you know, can we at least cap THC to 10%? Can we wait to do a study on edibles before you unleash 500 kinds of chocolates onto the market? Can we talk about advertising so you don't have billboards? And it was like, no, Kevin, you lost. It's off the table. We won 56%. The will of the voters. I promise you the will of the voters was not to allow pot gummy bears in the market. I promise you it wasn't to allow 98% THC. And actually, talk about will of the voters, 75% of Colorado towns have voted against having a marijuana store in their community after they voted for legalization. So people aren't spending a ton of time. Marijuana is not, this is also what the politicians need to realize this is a very passionate issue for like 4% of people. Hey, legalize marijuana. Okay, this is not even a top 30. When Gallup does it, they call you and say, what are the top 20 issues that affect you? Marijuana doesn't even register. And so that's why most people aren't paying attention. It's like, yeah, that sounds good. That's worded really well. Okay, yes. And it's not really about the consequences. That's why, again, I think Governor Scott absolutely did the right thing. Colorado is now the #1 youth state in the country. I'll talk a little bit about that. Rampant advertising. Oh, and guess what? The drug dealers haven't gone away. We were told there'd be no more black market. There's actually a thriving underground market. And they're taking advantage of the tax structure. They're taking advantage of other drugs. They're laundering. I mean, it's just, it is really exploding much more than it used to. All of these things have failed. We tried to do some limits and can't get anywhere. They're funding all the lobbyists, which are funding the state legislators. It's very, very sad and very hard to deal with. So let's talk about some of the things I worry about when it comes to regular marijuana use. And this isn't just like you tried pot once and you didn't like it. I'm talking about, you know, weekly, semi-regular. I get that people will try it, and actually most people who try pot don't like it. They stop, by the way. It's not like something everyone likes. But for the people that keep going on, this is what I worry about. I worry about whether you're under 14 or over 14, but critical is when you're under 14, the issue of high school dropout rates and how much more likely you are to drop out if you use marijuana. University entrance scores, how poorly you do when you use marijuana, especially before 14. You know, and people say, well, Kevin, this is for ages 21 and over. It's like, okay, wait a minute, that kind of sounds familiar. What's that thing that's 21 and over? Oh, alcohol. How's that going? Everyone under 21, no access, no normalization? Of course not. And the other thing is, as we heard, and I think it was the most critical slide we've seen all day, to have the one that you showed, about when addiction actually starts, in terms of when does the first use start that leads to addiction. If you don't touch drugs or alcohol by age 21, you are unlikely ever to have an addiction. Ever. You can start drinking at 21, which is the legal age. And so this doesn't start when you're 25. Again, it's not like everything's going great. I'm 35. I'm going to use heroin today. No. Or let's use fentanyl. And so the issue is marijuana is usually one of the, with alcohol, actually, and less tobacco, because we've done such a good job with tobacco. But it's really mainly alcohol and marijuana. If you're using it early, if you're going to use it at all, you're probably going to use it early. That's my point. You're probably going to use it at 14 or younger. So whether you're 14, 15, 16, whatever, I worry about high school completion, university entrance scores. This was a bombshell study that came out 4 years ago that caused a huge controversy about IQ. They're like, but it can't reduce IQ, because it says it reduced IQ by 6 to 8 points. That's enough to take you from an average student to a below average student. That's enough to knock you off the top 30 schools in terms of entrance colleges. That's enough to have you lose a lifetime income of more than $1 million. If you look at lifetime income of people with different IQ scores. It's a big deal, 6 to 8 points. It caused so much controversy in the industry. And that's really what it is. It's an industry. And they were like, no, but they didn't control for socioeconomic factors. Maybe the kid went to a bad school and was poor, and that's why he had a lower IQ, not marijuana. The researchers said, actually, we're scientists, we absolutely control for that. I mean, that's kind of like, duh, but thank you. owner of Chiba Chews International for telling me how to do, seriously. I mean, that's what this is about. It's the scientists against these guys. It's incredible. I mean, give them any credibility. But they said, you know what, but just for you, we're going to go back and do it in rats. And the last time we checked, rats did not have a socioeconomic status. We have all middle-class rats here. You're not any poor ones. There's no one that's been... And they did, and they found the same thing. Because you think, well, how do you test rats for IQ? Well, you do it for 50 years. You test animals for a lot of things. And there's obviously ways to do that with skills and tasks. And so I worry about that when I look at the IQ issue. Mental illness is another one I really, really worry about. There was the bombshell study for mental illness that came out in the mid-'80s. That was 45,000 Swedish conscripts were recruited for the study and asked about marijuana in their lifetime. They basically found more times you use marijuana, controlling for other factors, the more likely you were to develop schizophrenia, which is, probably worst mental illness, I would say, top 1 or 2. Yeah. You wouldn't want it on your worst enemy to have. And then there have been follow-ups. And basically the follow-ups show the big culprit is, again, the young age of initiation of marijuana. 15 or younger, 4.5 times more likely. 15 or over, still more likely, 16 and 17 and 18, 1.6 times more likely than non-users to develop a schizophrenia-like psychosis. That's a really big deal. Like that's a very, in terms of risk factors for these things, that's a big deal. Again, people will say, and many of you might be thinking, and I get it, Kevin, I know so many successful people who use marijuana. They're fine. They're not, and my thing to that is, okay, assuming that you're right and you know that every aspect of their life, let's assume that, yeah, maybe they are fine. So what? Do you know how many people, and I know there's a lot of law enforcement here, I've never done it, but I've heard of people who sped on the freeway before, like by 5 miles an hour. Never. Not everybody who speeds is getting in a car accident. You don't say, oh, speed limits don't work. Somebody went 77. You just stop it. You're wasting your time. No. Speed limit is there to have a message that society is discouraging speeding. And if you take the risk and you're speeding 10 miles an hour, for example, over the speed limit, you have a 13 times more likelihood of getting into a car accident, and we don't want that. We don't want to promote that. So we're going to have a speed limit. Now, I know a lot of people that have sped that are doing fine. They've never gotten into a car accident. But you just got to know that they've increased their risk, and that's what this is about. That's why I'm talking about these studies. You're increasing the risk. Do you know how many, listen, my next door neighbor smoked cigarettes for 77 years. I'm not kidding. He died at age 101. Of old age. 77 years of smoking. His lungs were as clean as a whistle. I don't understand at all. But that doesn't negate the research saying that marijuana, or saying that tobacco is linked with lung cancer. And guess what? Not everyone who wears a seatbelt, who doesn't wear a seatbelt and gets into an accident dies. Not everyone even who drives drunk and gets into an accident. That's, again, not a reason to say drunk driving laws, forget about it, they don't work, we don't need it. No, you have a standard, you're trying to discourage. And our drug policy, in my mind, especially for young people, should be just to discourage them from trying and using drugs. Simple. We make it so complicated. It's like, well, we need to balance it. No. Discourage drug use. And you don't discourage it by having billboards and all this kind of thing, kicking candies. And so, sure, there are a lot of people who never got schizophrenia who use maybe a lot of marijuana. Fine. Not everyone. It's not causal. We're not saying it's like the law of gravity. But you should know that you're increasing the risk. That's the issue. And right now, the industry is essentially denying risk, just like the tobacco industry and pharma has done. Things like cannabis dependence, other drug, we'll talk about other drug use in a minute, gateway issues, suicide attempt, high school, all of these things. Oh, this is a study, another study in the Lancet, most prominent psychiatry journal in the world. And they looked at thousands of people over many years. Because people like to say, Kevin, I know this person or I know that person, and I hate to break it to you, your story is not evidence. I was once taught by a good scientist that the plural of anecdote isn't evidence. It's anecdotes. Stories. Great. You know that person. Wonderful. But guess what this study of thousands of people found in terms of overtime? Likelihood, that's what we need to look at. And it shows these negative things, dependence, illicit drug use, suicide attempt, etc. There's a lot of, I'm not going to go over everything. We'll make sure you get a copy of these slides. Workplace accidents, pot and the workplace don't mix. And I have to tell you something, pot and getting ready for the 21st century workplace really don't mix. I was at a UN meeting, and I shouldn't share this because there's cameras and press here, but anyway, I was at a UN meeting. I will anyway. I'm not in government, do anymore. I was sitting at a table with the representatives from, I'll just say this, 4 very successful Asian countries who will remain nameless. One of them has over 1 billion people, but I don't know. And we were sitting, and they were saying, at the UN in New York, they were talking about what they were doing for their country to help young people and get jobs ready. One country said we're high-speed broadband for all, for free, and education. The other one, we're paying teachers more and investing in education. The other one, we're getting, we're attracting manufacturers by doing this and doing that. And that day, with my luck, happened to set the New York Times on the table. And on the front or second page, there was a big picture of Colorado with gummy bears and edibles on it. I'm talking about marijuana. And so the table comes to me, and it's a guy from one of the countries picks it up and says, and your country is debating whether the hot gummy bear should be this big or this big. And they all sort of, I kind of gave the awkward laugh, ha 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 ha, yeah. I sort of wanted to hide under a table because they were basically like, let us know how it goes. You're going to legalize marijuana? Wonderful. You guys do it. And let us know in 5 to 10 years while we're building jobs for the next century. Let us know how you're doing. And the smiles on their faces. I mean, and it was just, it hit me right there. It was actually a very embarrassing moment for me that they're talking about all these interesting things about their jobs and their kids. And we're talking about what color the pot gummy bear should be and how big it should be. Where are the priorities, folks? Where are the standards? I mean, when did this happen? That was our debate. And let me tell you, the other countries, they're loving it. They're like, please, go right ahead. Try it out. Because we're going to be, working hard and attracting jobs and businesses while, in Colorado right now, the largest construction company, they can't hire people from Colorado anymore because they can't pass a drug test. Wyoming loves it, by the way, they're getting all the jobs. But they can't hire them. And so people are like, well, Massachusetts has done it here, Kevin. And Maine has legalized it. So shouldn't we kind of tap into that market? Maybe you want to attract the people who want to come here to vacation, to live and to work, that don't want to smell pot everywhere that when they're walking down the street, that don't want the marijuana store selling the gummy bears, that don't want to promote young people using. Maybe that should be something to strive for, rather than like, we're going to miss out. Ooh, they're all going to go to, you know what, let them go to Boston. Because you can have a brand that is bringing in families. Because let me just tell you something. You might think this is an awesome idea when you're 24. And I get that 24-year-olds can vote, and they do sometimes. But when you're 44 and you have kids, it's not always you're not like, priorities change. Let's just put it that way. And so I think a lot of politicians who are saying, the polls, and we're going to miss out on the other states, let's wait a little bit. Take a deep breath. This isn't, and maybe you want to attract folks that don't want to come here to get high. And I'll tell you, the mayor of Denver wishes that was the case too. Anybody been to Denver lately? Hanging out at the 16th Street Mall downtown? You can tell the story then. But you don't want to go to Denver. Go to visitdenver.com. It's a Denver branded visit, like convention center. The amount of complaints on that website from out-of-town visitors who are saying, why would I want to go to the 16th Street Mall anymore? We have homeless tourism, all attracted because people think it's free pot everywhere, and you can smoke marijuana. You cannot walk downtown without the intense secondhand exposure, which, by the way, is a very big deal, because the research on secondhand and third-hand smoke, third-hand meaning from the vents and stuff like that, is really, really scary too. So I think we need to think about all of this. The link to other drugs. Folks, most people who try marijuana won't use heroin. That's true. But the vast majority, over 90% of people using heroin, absolutely had marijuana as one of the precursor drugs. You just can't deny it. I'm not saying it causes it. I'm not saying that if you use pot, you're going to go use heroin and your license. No. I'm just saying if you use it, you now increase your chances of using those other drugs. The question is not, is there a connection? There's a very close connection, and there's actually a tighter connection, with marijuana and heroin than there is even with some of the other links, painkillers and heroin. And so, we need to think about why is that? And the researchers knew, people are thinking maybe it's because you get a certain high with cannabinoids in your brain, and you need a bigger high. Let me tell you something. The opiate receptors are much more powerful than THC receptors in your body. I mean, that's why heroin is so addictive. That's why your body loves it. It loves it a lot more than it loves marijuana. That's the scary part about it. But folks think maybe you got the high, you need to try something else. They're still looking at, there's a lot of research on rodents about adolescents exposed to THC, the adults seek heroin more avidly, exposed in utero, the offspring seek heroin. So exposed to marijuana, offspring seeks heroin. There's a lot of new studies coming out that we're looking at, and it's important to follow that, definitely. Let's think more about the Colorado experience. More Colorado youth on probation are testing positive for marijuana since legalization. Surprise, surprise. There are more offenses in Colorado high schools since legalization. Guess how much more money they've given to high school counselors and high school and the law enforcement? Anyone have a number? Yeah, 0. Got it. Exactly. Nothing. They said this was going to pour down to the schools. You know how many new teachers they've hired with the pot money? That would be another big fat 0. And so the hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know what's happening. A lot of it's going to administer the program, by the way. That's the irony of the libertarian argument. Like, we don't want government, but let's legalize marijuana. Well, wait a minute. You're now setting up an entire government bureaucracy that is regulating marijuana and taxing it. How does that work? If you don't want government, great. You should advocate for decriminalization and doing it in the privacy of your own home. But why are you advocating for setting up a government bureaucracy? That costs a lot of money to do that. Testing, regulating, taxing, it's not cheap. By the way, it's not only not cheap, there's this little thing called federal law. I mean, what? I mean, right? Federal law. And I know it's not popular, I get it, I get we're an independent state, it's not going to be, I get it. But there is a little thing called federal law, and that means it's very hard for a state to do the testing, the taxing, the regulating. Because if one day the person at DOJ wakes up and says, right, you know what, I think we've got to enforce that federal law right now, you're kind of out of luck. And you can fight it in courts and this and that, but unless you change federal law, which we don't want to happen. Right now, you're out of luck. But this isn't surprising that they're reporting all these new things. There are now more hot shops in Washington and Colorado than Starbucks and McDonald's. Now, they say, well, that's because we need people to get marijuana, otherwise they're never going to get it. It's like the people that say, Kevin, we have to legalize pot because no one can get marijuana now if they want it. I think some people can get it if they want it. It's not a reason to legalize it. And why would you want to use them out of stores? This isn't popular. And, it's one thing to have one store. It's another thing to have one every corner, especially in certain neighborhoods. People in treatment for marijuana use in Colorado reporting heavy use, not just once or twice, but using it almost every day, has increased from 22% in 2007 to 36% in 2014. And even the New York Times is saying marijuana taxes won't save state budgets. All that money you're getting from alcohol taxes, oh, whoops, it's going to costs. All that money from tobacco, we have more money from tobacco revenues in our history, because tobacco taxes are so high. It doesn't come close to the costs. Folks, why would a marijuana that combines, actually, I would say the worst part of tobacco and alcohol, it makes you intoxicated and you're inhaling a burning leaf in your lungs. By the way, you can smoke lettuce, it's still bad for you. Inhaling a leaf in your lungs is bad news. And vaporizing it, don't think you're getting away with it either, because you can't control the heat levels and you have no idea what that's doing. So, the costs are huge. The emergency room, this is one hospital that's skyrocketing in cost. People are like, why are you going to the hospital? Oh, because they're eating a candy bar that was left on the table that they thought was a regular candy bar. And they eat, if you're like me, you're not even just eating one of them, unfortunately, you're eating 3 of them. And then 20 minutes later, you're getting that panic attack. because you don't even really realize what's going on. You haven't used marijuana for 20 years. Or you're 5 years old and your brain is not anywhere near development, and you've just ingested 20 milligrams of THC. That'll do it too. And so we're seeing a lot of the hospital admissions happening in Colorado because of that. This is the Oregon police report. I'm really showing this for law enforcement, but also for everybody. The state of Oregon State Police wrote a report this year. It said that the black market in Oregon since legalization has exploded, and that 70% of marijuana market today is the black market, even though it's fully legal. The pro-legalization political establishment didn't really like this report. They didn't release it. It got leaked, and I don't know whose head of the police are going to go as a result of that from the governor, but the bottom line is it got leaked. We're filing public records requests. We want to find out more about this. Like, what is, and the problem is it's suppressing data. And everyone's like, we need to legalize so we can study it. Wait a minute. They're legalizing it and suppressing data because they don't want to show that things aren't going well. If you're a politician who's running on legalization of marijuana, why would you show that things aren't going well? And that's what's happening there. And there has actually been, this is a shocking one in many communities, there are more kids arrested today for pot than before legalization. And actually it's more black and Hispanic, which is really interesting because we were told that we would have fewer minority arrests if you legalize pot. But today, for pot possession, there are more kids being arrested. Where are the pot shops, by the way? They're in the poorest communities in Denver. This is the green is upper class communities, orange, purple. There we go. And that's not a surprise, again. For states that don't have a monopoly or whatever on alcohol, and they have just there's a market like that, we see what has happened. And for marijuana, it's not a surprise. They're one of the most vulnerable areas. Folks, addiction is not just your genetics or what drugs you're using. Addiction is a complicated equation, and part of that is what supports you have. Family, community, resources, healthcare, housing, socioeconomic, all of these things, education, have to do with it. And the industry knows it. That's why there are 8 times as many liquor stores in our country in poor areas than in richer areas. That's why the industries, addictive industries, target vulnerable people. They are most vulnerable to addiction as well. So this isn't, this is not a surprise. Moving forward here, I'll just go forward because I want to be able to take some questions as well. The increase in Colorado marijuana use that you never hear about because we're told it hasn't increased. That's wrong, it actually has. The US average is much lower and it's increasing at a much lower rate. These are the top states in the country for marijuana. Most of them have legalized it. If you want to look at the health side of it, don't take my word for it. Read the National Academy of Sciences report that just came out a months ago, and it talks about all of these negative aspects. I like to tell them when I speak oftentimes to high schools, like, don't take my word for it. Do your research. Don't listen to me. Go to the National Academy. But research isn't, like I said, the latest post by, pot-loving Mike on Wikipedia. The research is by credible scientists. Look it up. And you'll find a lot of things. A lot of times, again, when you're in the political establishment, I get it, you got to show what's going well with your state. I mean, have you ever seen a politician get behind a podium and say, thanks everybody, I wanted to call this press conference to let everybody aware of a lot of bad news that's been going on under my watch in the state. And I wanted to highlight it. So I get it that Hickenlooper, the governor of Colorado, isn't exactly running around the country saying how badly things are going, because it's under his watch. He didn't want it, by the way. Democratic governor, he did not want legalization. He was totally opposed to it, but they voted for it under his watch. He had to implement it, he said. And so now he's saying, things are going better than expected. He said that on Meet the Press. A huge backlash by addiction experts from his own state. These are people who would have voted for him. This isn't like Liberty University or something. I mean, no offense to Liberty University, but it's not like someone who was politically against him, is my point. This is Harvard, University of Colorado, Yale, University of California, major research institutions, writing him a letter saying, you know what? I know he told Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, but I gotta tell you, the stats and the things that we're seeing do not paint a rosy picture. Please understand this. And it got some coverage that they did that, but that's because we have to really listen to the science. Look, it wasn't that long ago when we had doctors and dentists promoting cigarettes. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarettes. Ask your dentist. I would recommend Viceroy. That's not that long ago. But that is our history. But we were able to replace that very, very quickly with science like this. Now, some people will say, Kevin, cigarettes are legal, and we've seen a reduction in use. So maybe we should legalize marijuana because we'll see a reduction in use. Folks, cigarettes have always been legal. Hate to say, it wasn't they were illegal and then they made it legal and the use went down. They were always legal in modern history. It went down because we actually started not accepting smoking as an acceptable activity in our society. We started saying, you know what, you can't do it here. We don't want you to do it. This is not a good idea. You need to get help, treatment, prevention, awareness, exposing big tobacco. That's how we reduce tobacco in this country. Again, after many lives lost. But people thought we were crazy to say 20 years ago we'd get rid of smoking in restaurants. We'd get rid of smoking in airplanes. They thought that was never going to happen. And they couldn't put smoking in films by popular actors all the time. Every film, right, before the 1980s. 90s. And we've seen a reduction. So I don't think this is, and that's the reduction in smoking that we've seen over the last 15 years. I don't think this is inevitable. There's nothing you could do about it. It's inevitable. This is an activity used by 9% of Americans on a monthly basis. It's not used by 70% of us like alcohol. It's not even used by 40% of us like we used to use for cigarettes. And so I think right now they are on an upswing of, we're legalizing it. But I think when we push back and work together and talk with science, we don't want reefer madness. I get it. We oversold the pot issue 100 years ago. Let's get over reefer madness. I know. We can learn and be credible and talk about the science and get the experiences out. And I think if we do that, this thing's going to reverse. It's either going to reverse soon or it's going to take 100 years. It will reverse. It's just, in 100 years, how many lives have to be affected to realize that the stove was hot before our hand burned? That's the question. And our great-grandkids are going to be sitting in this hall, and they're either going to say, whew, that was a close one. Glad that it reversed, in whatever decade. Or they're going to say, what the heck were they thinking? Marijuana, edibles, advertising, another legal drug, another addictive drug to normalize? What were they thinking? Look what we're dealing with now. And so we have the decision to make. It's in our hands. It's an amazing thing, it's in our hands. It wasn't in our hands with alcohol. Nobody was around 100 years ago when cigarettes were normalized. Cigarettes were an invention of the tobacco. Nobody was dying of lung cancer as much before the invention of cigarettes, by the way. We've been smoking tobacco for a while. That was an invention of the industry. Anyway, we weren't around then. We're around now. And so it really is in our hands. We absolutely have to remember, yes, opiates are killing people. Let's focus on it. And let's not forget this is a holistic issue. This is not a singular issue. This has to do with a lot of other things. And by the way, it's not just marijuana either. That's at the top list today, but it's a lot of things. But we have to look at this holistically. We should, the only way to make money in this business, as I said, is to cultivate users. The big tobacco industry, if left unchecked, will attempt to take this whole thing over. We need to think about this. And so we've, with New Futures and others, as our affiliates in the state, we're, always wanting folks to help out. And you can download all kinds of resources, including this presentation and others, from learnaboutsam.org. We have an app, which I should have put on here, in the App Store called Sam Action that will alert you to ways to contact your legislators, contact your federal and state to be able to talk to them about this issue with talking points. It's called Sam Action on the App Store. It's free. We just developed it last month. We have an ad campaign called Are We Sure? To just ask, are we sure we're ready for what this entails? That's at arewesure.net. And then you can always email me directly. We'd love to work with you if you want to be more active in your state. I gotta say, we'd love to have young people be active and be leaders and talk to politicians about why they don't want their brains to be dollar signs. Because that's what it is, dollar signs. And we'd really love to work with you. So anyhow, I hope I gave you a couple of things to think about that maybe you hadn't before. You guys are all doing incredible work in the community, and that's why we're here. Deb, thank you for the invitation, and it was an honor to be here. Thank you.
That is my favorite part. I'm so excited to introduce all these youth participants, and it's something that you don't want to miss. They are just dynamic, and I love working with them. And why don't you all come up here and I'll introduce you. All right, so I am so honored to introduce a group of extremely talented and impressive young leaders and advocates. And those who are here today are Michaela Ash, Molly Brown, Mac Doyle, Toby Phillips, Carrie Plume, Kayla Roy, Adeline Stark, and Troy Warner.
Everyone. We're all very excited to be here today. This year, as with every year, we had many important prevention initiatives that we have been working on. However, as they mentioned, we are only able to spotlight one of those today that was made especially for the Prevention Summit. We began the second installment of CADY's World, the PSA, in April, and have had the opportunity to interview many stakeholders within our community, as she mentioned. We are grateful they were willing to share their expertise, knowledge, and time with us. We also want to extend a thank you to Brandon Doherty for assisting us with this project. Also, I want to note what you're about to see is the Prevention Summit cut. We have a lot of content that we wanted to include, but we're not able to. So this is the shorter version. There'll be a full version on CADY's website at the end of next week. So stay tuned for that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Molly.
I'm Adeline.
And I'm Michaela. And we're reporting in Plymouth, New Hampshire for Community for Alcohol and Drug-Free Youth Advisory and Advocacy Council's second installment of CADY's World.
Today, we're going to get the inside scoop on the hotly debated drug that is leading the nation and world as the most widely used illicit drug of choice.
Welcome to CADY's World. Teenagers and adults are confused, not only about the drug especially, but the laws and the regulations that surround it. There are many conflicting messages in the media, in schools, and legislatively.
Let's get some of our questions answered and clarify this culture of confusion surrounding marijuana.
So the first question is, what is THC?
It's the cannabinoid, the active cannabinoid.
The drug that's in marijuana, you can get it in pill form too, which should get your body.
We naturally have cannabinoid chemicals that are produced in our brain and bodies. These natural cannabinoids bind to cannabinoid receptors in our brain and body, but when THC from marijuana is introduced into the mix of the natural production of chemicals, it interferes with the normal functioning of the endocannabinoid system, which results in misfiring, lapses, and disconnect of messages from one brain cell to another.
Decriminalization just means that it's a small fine, like $10, I think in New Hampshire. Legalization means you're not fined if you have under a certain amount, or depending on the law.
Decriminalizing it is going to make it so people can actually have it and smoke it and use it in their own home and not be a criminal.
Yeah, so suddenly I'm not in handcuffs, I get a ticket, like a traffic ticket. Yeah, if you've ever heard about Colorado and Washington. It's a great example of legalization.
I think it's illegal because it is a brain-altering substance.
It has some very dangerous aspects to it.
I think maybe because they don't have a lot of tools to use otherwise.
A lot of what I've been seeing is just these feelings of being overwhelmed with pressures, with life, with circumstances at school and at home, and just navigating those complexities and really wanting an outlet to try to help numb that.
I think it's those mixed messages and changing attitudes of adults towards marijuana. We're not, as a society, talking about the harmful effects as much as I think we should be.
It's like there's enough pressure as it is. Adding drugs and alcohol will not relieve that. All it's going to do is add more to it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that they start using it. I think peer pressure has to do with it as well.
Absolutely. 25 to 30% of students in high school suffer from anxiety and or depression.
We see so many young people who are dealing with anxiety and depression. It's really an epidemic of anxiety and depression in our communities today.
I don't think it's harmful, marijuana. I think the smoke from marijuana can be harmful to the lungs.
So you don't believe marijuana to be harmful?
Not based on what I've learned.
Okay.
The way that the substance can alter your decision-making ability is really concerning to me, not only as someone who works with youth, but as someone who's a parent.
Well, smoking marijuana is very similar to smoking cigarettes in that you can develop cancer. You can actually develop, raises your risk of heart attack and stroke.
Things that I know are that it decreases motivation, it decreases clarity of thought and awareness. I know it's bad for your lungs. I know it has reproductive effects on males particularly, I know that.
Contrary to popular myth and misconception, regular marijuana use is a risk multiplier and carries risk of impaired judgment, drugged driving, injuries, lower cognitive functioning, lower income, educational attainment, and higher rates of unemployment.
They're dabbing, they're using edibles.
I hear more and more about vaping and, the use of very intense oil forms, resin forms. This is scary stuff.
It varies from person to person. Do I think it's like an open door, like, okay, here's some opioids? No.
Right, okay.
I think the presumption is that if you use marijuana, you're going to eventually move on to harder drugs. That may not be the case. However, it does put you in the presence of those people who can get you harder drugs.
I can say from what we're seeing out there in the communities, a lot of people that are addicted to heroin or meth oftentimes are also using marijuana and started with marijuana before they got into those other drugs.
Gateway drugs are really whatever an individual who has a risk of developing a substance abuse disorder uses because it's progressive.
Nearly all people who are addicted to heroin also use at least one other drug. Most used at least 3 other drugs before experimenting with heroin.
And from what I'm hearing, it's pretty easy these days. It's pretty easy for them to get it, and easier more now that it's been legalized in some places, and it's making the transport easier.
I see some young people who come from programs for troubled youth, and those kids can tell you exactly where to go in town and exactly what list of drugs they can get a hold of.
terms of the THC factor, which is, you know, the addictive properties in the marijuana, were significantly lower in that time. I mean, they used to call it grass because it was so weak and, you know, kind of ambivalent. Now we're at a place where they've scientifically manufactured these superpowered THC strains.
Marijuana is very different now than it was before in terms of its content, its potency. You know, many people really talk about marijuana today as being almost a completely different drug than the marijuana that was used in the 60s and 70s.
Marijuana is not just a plant anymore, and people are not just smoking it. Derivatives and resins come in forms called green crack wax, earwax, hash oil capsules, butter, shatter, and even butane hash oil, also known as BHO, in which a butane blowtorch is used for extraction.
I think they're looking to feel good. I think they're looking to de-stress themselves.
I think sometimes they're a little confused because they're getting mixed messages from adults and also maybe from different laws in different states.
Being a part of the party scene and engaging with your friends through substance use has become part of our culture.
Probably because they're told not to do it.
Out of it, peer pressure and hype.
Kids that have troubles and issues look at it as an opportunity to escape them. Makes it a lot simpler than doing the hard work of learning appropriate coping skills and how to process things appropriately. It's a lot easier to pick up marijuana and smoke it and fade away into dreamland, so to speak, you know?
Absolutely. They see it happening in other states. And I think they just assume that, well, those other states think it's okay, so it must be okay and it must be safe. And yeah, New Hampshire should have that too. But we're not really looking at the long-term effects of legalization.
In general, you know, I think people think that if they say it's okay, if they make it legal, that makes it somehow not as dangerous for your health, which isn't true.
I think there is the perception that marijuana is safe. It's not heroin, it's not opioids, so how is it that it's still considered as dangerous as that? And so I think all of that comes in, and as well, a misperception that although yes, it might be less harmful, that doesn't mean it's not.
I think it affects it very negatively. I think what happens is with marijuana, you end up with decreased motivation. It can actually affect your mental health.
It's hard enough to find a way to have academic achievement be a part of a young person's life.
I think the earlier onset of usage, the more likely a student is going to withdraw from being fully engaged in their education.
I would think that that would have an impact on not only their educational life, but their entire life, period.
Probably see it differently than it once was seen. It's become sort of a casual thing, and a lot of people have realized it's not harmful. It's a good way to relax.
I think they're beginning, after doing thorough research, we're going to find out that pot is not as harmful as some of the other drugs that are out there.
If we look at who really wants it to be legalized, first and foremost are people who want to make money off of it. And other people, I think, who's for legalization are people that that abuse the drug on a regular basis, naturally. You know, they're in a space now where they're doing something illegal. They would prefer to do it legally, I'm sure.
When we're dealing with people who are using heroin, methamphetamine, any of the harder drugs, we're almost always seeing a co-occurrence of marijuana, almost all the time.
I'm seeing it viewed by teens as not being harmful at all.
My experience, it's the age of onset is earlier and earlier in terms of exposure. And so that's concerning.
You know, my biggest concern is around this issue of perception of risk. I'm also concerned about the fact that there is a lot of misinformation. I'm also just really concerned that the conversation is very one-sided and really is not taking into account that whether you legalize it or not, we have a responsibility to keep people safe.
Very rarely do we treat someone in our facility, and oftentimes when we get people into treatment, they're at a place where they're on the cusp of death. You know, their use has gotten to a place where they either need to go to treatment and get well, or they're going to die. Almost all the time, marijuana use has been involved in the progressive use onto other drugs. So that's what I see. You know.
We are asking parents, community members, and the leaders of our state to safeguard the futures of our kids and communities. And that will only happen if we stay focused on the facts.
Thank you for being a part of CADY's world.
Warm introduction, Deb, and I'm really honored and privileged to be here at CADY. I met Deb at the Northern New England American Society of Addiction Medicine meeting where Alex's story was displayed, and it touched my heart, warmed my soul. I have 40 minutes to give a 2-hour lecture. I've cut that down from a 4-hour seminar, although just about 8 days ago I was presented at the New Hampshire and Maine Regional Rotary Convention or Symposium, and they gave me 10 minutes, although I did have a panel. So I think I can do it. It is really, I'm very humbled to have followed and also be in front of such distinguished speakers. I've known Kevin for the person who was drunk driving. I'm talking about the unwanted teenage pregnancy. I'm talking about the person who goes into the bathroom, comes into the emergency room, complains that they have back pain because they know that if they can convince me, the emergency room physician, that they have a kidney stone, I might give them some Percocet. So they go into the bathroom to pee in the cup, they prick their finger, put a little blood in it, and aha, there's blood in the urine, they must have a kidney stone, and off you go with the prescription for Percocet. And it goes on and on. Nicotine, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, they're all related to the disease of addiction. So 1 in 7 people will develop substance use disorder at some point in their lives. And my goal today is to try and make us all feel obligated why we need to educate about the disease of addiction. Why I wrote the novel, Addiction on Trial, Tragedy in Down East Maine. It could very easily have been Addiction on Trial anywhere USA. People say, well, why did you write about Down East Maine? Well, I happen to spend time in Down East Maine, and like this part of the world, it's an absolutely beautiful area. And I figured that when it becomes a blockbuster movie, it would be a great place to film it. And I may be a legend in my own mind, but please don't dissuade me from that. But I want all of us to leave this room today, sort of following up on what these wonderful kids just said. and leave this room understanding that we need to emphasize addiction as an equal opportunity disease. When Philip Seymour Hoffman made his last movie, you didn't say, aha, there's a heroin addict. So it ranges from the poorest and the homeless all the way to the most advanced and educated of our citizens. I also want people to understand what the consequences and costs are of not treating, that there are benefits in medication-assisted treatment, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but medication-assisted treatment for the disease of addiction is no different than medication-assisted treatment for the illness of diabetes. When the pancreas no longer produces insulin, we give that person medication-assisted treatment. We give them insulin. When President Kennedy's adrenal cortex no longer produced cortisol and he had Addison's disease, we gave him steroids. We didn't call him a drug addict. And in fact, that's the same type of related drug, the steroids that he was taking, that our football players take. So medications and drugs have to be distinguished by what are we treating, and are we really replacing something in the body that the body normally would use. So we're not, with medication-assisted treatment, we're not replacing one drug for another. We absolutely have to reduce the shame of addiction, and we have to reduce the fear, the not in my backyard. And I'm going to tell the story right now. Deb and I live next to each other, let's pretend. And I got my lawn chair in my yard. And I got a few dandelions in my yard. And Deb, I look over the fence and, well, Deb's got some dandelions in her damn yard too. Well, her dandelions are invading my yard. She needs to treat her dandelions in her yard. It's always the next community, the next state, the next municipality, whatever. We all have these dandelions growing in our own yards, and we need to face that, and we need to have treatment centers in as many communities as we have drug-dependent individuals. We have diabetes centers, we have hypertensive centers, cardiac centers, we have cancer centers. Why don't we have addiction centers? And I really want to thank Governor Sununu for his comment about we need to decrease some of the regulatory restrictions in order to more easily site treatment centers. Yes, there needs to be oversight of treatment centers. Yes, there needs to be some regulation, but we need to emphasize the fact that we need to advance our understanding on why we need to have treatment centers in all communities. So now this is the challenging part, right? In the past, as Kevin talked about, we talked in sound bites. That commercial is a step ahead, and not just a sound bite. But we really need to put people's faces onto this illness and really paint it as a family disease. And so the reason I wrote Addiction on Trial was so that you could understand what it was really like to be in a family, or to be a lawyer, or to be the police chief, or to be the scholar per captain who was facing issues related to the disease of addiction. I would end up speaking to audiences. Dr. Kassels is going to speak about the disease of addiction, and typically what would happen, I would get a half a dozen people at the library, and like I'm doing now, I'd be preaching to the choir. So I wrote this novel based upon my years of medical experience and my legal experience in order to reach a wider audience. And I must say that I've been very pleased with it because it's allowed me to reach out to lots and lots of groups who normally would not want to read a book about addiction. But like any blockbuster movie or book, you need sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, the drugs are evident. The sex has been approved by my lovely wife as being PG-14. And the rock and roll is not the Grateful Dead, it's the rock and roll on the high seas where the heroin addict, yes, the heroin addict Travis saved somebody's life. So what is it like to be someone who's opioid dependent, arrested, in withdrawal, in jail, and for you to be the parent and receive that call? And what's it like to be that egotistical but likable Boston attorney who comes up to Down East Maine to try and get the truth out of somebody who's in jail, who's been accused of murder, because, quote, addicts don't rat on one another? And what's it like to be out on the high seas and have to use OxyContin because you can't snort or shoot your heroin in order to stay out of withdrawal and yet save somebody's life. And what's it like to be the parent of somebody? You have a physician, you know, an emergency room physician actually, so you know, you write what you know. Jimmy comes to Down East Maine from Kansas City after being in recovery for many years to try and find a new life, bumps into his old buddy Travis Bomer. Travis Bomer's a scholar. Travis Bomer goes out to sea, asks him to look over his fiancée Annette, and the next thing you know, Annette and Jimmy's blood is splattered all over the dashboard of Annette's car. The packets of cocaine on Annette's table or in Jimmy's pocket. We've got some problems. But first I'd like you to meet Saul Tolson. Saul Tolson is a therapist who Jimmy engaged before he left. And Saul writes, it gives lectures wherever he can. And Saul Tolson believes that it is much easier to teach somebody something for the first time than to unindoctrinate somebody, which is why the Harvard crew coach, as Saul Tolson talks about, always recruited people to crew for the crew team who were burnout football players or didn't make the lacrosse team or were track stars. And the reason was he could teach them how to crew the right way for the first time. Well, I do not have the luxury of the Harvard crew coach, Saul Tolson would say. Everyone in this room already has an opinion of what an addict is. Usually we would use the word addict in a special way. Cocaine addict, heroin addict. But rarely do we hear the words alcohol addict or nicotine addict or marijuana addict. No one would refer to Vice President Cheney as an addict, despite the fact that we know that nicotine contributes to heart disease. And Mickey Mantle remains a hero, despite needing a liver transplant because of liver cancer complicated by cirrhosis from his years of drinking. I am hopeful that each of you can put aside any bias, any preconceived notions that you bring here today. For 30 minutes, I ask that you be like the athlete who has never rowed before and put aside your current opinion of addiction. Give me your cleansed mind for just a brief time. At the end of my presentation, you may accept, reject, or modify anything I said, but please start now with a clean slate. Before I begin, I want everyone to join me and tightly close your eyes for just 60 seconds and let us each listen to our own breathing and contemplate nothing. So I'm dumping him into the category of one of those earthy, crunchy granola type labels. Precisely the type of label he was trying to combat, which is why he would wear a sports coat and a tie to his lectures. He would wait a full 60 seconds before saying, now slowly open your eyes, and without verbally responding, I want each of you to ask yourself if the last 60 seconds was spent only listening to your breathing while repressing all thoughts. If you were not successful in completely voiding your mind, you now know the struggles of addiction. It is not just mind over matter. I will do my best to further explain the complexities. So he would go on and talk about the costs, and I will get to that. And then, uncomfortable with the inevitable applause, Dr. Tolson kept repeating through the clapping, so there must be some questions. The questions came, but none of his answers carried the consequences of those he would have to give to questions posed while under oath at the murder trial of James Frederick Sedgwick in Down East Maine. Right? So, that's how I try and get the reader hooked into reading this novel to learn about the disease of addiction. But what Saul Tolson talks about, and I'm going to go through this quickly, is we have a reward center which starts at the nucleus accumbens, goes to the ventral tegmental area and up to the prefrontal cortex. And in fact, and this, I apologize, the slide isn't all that clear, but the VTA is the ventral tegmental area, the NA is the nucleus accumbens, and the PFC is the prefrontal cortex. And you can see where each of these drugs act. And in fact, heroin and what does that say? Alcohol and cocaine all act through the same mechanisms. And in fact, the medication naltrexone, also called Vivitrol, not only blocks the effects of heroin, but also decreases the craving of people with the disease of alcoholism. So I ask you, how different are these addictions? And if we really want to look at things as far as cost, outpatient treatment and medication-assisted treatment costs about $5,000 a year. Residential treatment costs about $20,000, and incarceration costs $50,000 or more. So when I talk to groups, I know there are naysayers, not necessarily in this group, but out there. And so I appeal to their pocketbooks. And I want you to remember this, that even if you believe it's mind over matter, it is much cheaper to treat and much better for society than to criminalize, incarcerate, and create a revolving door. We spend $400 billion a year on crime, health care costs, and lost worker productivity. So as they say in the Midas commercial, you can pay now or you can pay later, but you're going to pay. So the whole aspect of we have good addictions and bad addictions is just not true. So I want to back up just a little bit and talk about the biopsychosocial aspects of the disease of addiction. There were Scandinavian studies done years ago, and they took monozygotic twins, identical twins, that were adopted from families. And they showed, in fact, that the sociological environment that these twins were put into different families, that in fact, the sociological environment mattered on whether they themselves became alcoholics or not. And that was a factor whether or not their biological parents were alcoholics. But the most important determining factor on whether these kids developed the disease of alcoholism was the genetic predisposition they inherited from their biological parents, even though they may never have met. But why should that surprise us? Is it any different than diabetes? Is it any different than hypertension or heart disease? Those are genetic, genetically originated diseases as well. So I want to talk about the solutions, but before I talk about the solutions, let's talk about who or what to blame. And if you want, on my website, addictionontrial.com, there's a full-page explanation of each of these. So I'm going to move through these very quickly. We know there's been injudicious prescribing by physicians of opioids. Now, I belong to an organization called Coalition on Physician Education and Substance Use Disorders. That's a mouthful. Called COPE. And it was started by a physician emeritus out of Brown, David Lewis. And I spoke to 35 medical school curriculum deans in Charlotte, North Carolina within the last year or so. And very few of them had really instituted yet any significant training to physicians and medical students about the disease of addiction. And so that needs to change and has changed. In addition to that, physicians are biased as well. So we have to change the attitudes of physicians. But we have patient expectations in this country. So how many of you in this room, raise your hand now, if you would like to have your gallbladder taken out under acupuncture? You know, raise your hand. No, somebody. Well, they do this in China all the time. There's not a single person? All right, you don't have to answer this or raise your hand. How many times when you go to the dentist, it says, oh God, if he drills me, I just hope they knock me out, right? We are a society that does not want to feel pain. So yes, we can, and yes, we should blame the doctors, but we also have to blame ourselves. Now, I want to tell you a quick story. I love kids, and I wanted to go into pediatrics. I didn't go into pediatrics. I couldn't stand the damn parents. They drove me freaking bananas. And the reason they drove me bananas is no matter how much I tried to educate them that little Johnny's earache is probably viral, and in fact he doesn't need antibiotics, but why don't you use a little nasal spray, or take a little of this, or make sure you hydrate, put the humidifier in the room. Yes, you may have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take him for a walk outside if he's got the croup or whatever. And the attitude, and then let's see you again in a day or two. You don't understand, doctor. I have a job to go to. I got things to do. Susie got the antibiotics down the street. I want antibiotics. That's how we are as a society. I want pain relief. I want it now, I want it tomorrow, and I want it forever. Big Pharma. We obviously know that Purdue, when they put out OxyContin, misled us, and in fact, after we realized that you could crush it and you could snort it, that in fact what we did is, well, what legislation did is they forced them to reconstitute it and in fact make it so that you could no longer crush it, snort it, or shoot it. And so once we did that, heroin rose because people with the disease of opioid dependency looked for a cheaper alternative. We don't talk much about the war in Afghanistan, but the war in Afghanistan created the influx of cheap heroin in this country. Because when we drove the Taliban out, the farmers were subsidized by the Taliban to grow food crops. It was a good thing the Taliban did. When we moved in Afghanistan, apparently, we didn't subsidize our farmers. So what did they do? They went back to growing heroin, opium, which grows like weeds. You don't need a whole lot of money to grow it compared to food crops. And so they flooded the Western European market. All the Mexican and South American heroin, which was going to Western Europe and to North America, lost half its market. So what happened? Supply is up, price goes down. $4 a bag. We talked about NIMBY already, the dandelion story. So it's a supply and demand. It is not a war on drugs, it is a war on addiction. And I want to compliment President Obama and his administration for recharacterizing that. Now, mental health. We need to increase and improve our mental health system in this country. When I go to the airport, I can't stand the fact that I get dressed at home, I go to the airport, I take off my belt, I take off my shoes, I get totally undressed, I go through the scanner thing, right? I have to get there 2 hours before, and then I get dressed again. Now, I'm not recommending we all come in naked with our clothes in plastic bags, although that would mean you only had to get dressed once. But now you're there 2 hours early. Where do a lot of people end up going? To the bar. Who's going to the bar? Who tends to use alcohol to self-medicate emotion? People who are anxious. So people who are anxious drink alcohol. People who are depressed, what type of drug do they like to use on the streets? Cocaine, it's an upper. Amphetamines. People who have opioid dependency, a significant proportion of those people have bipolar disease, and they find out that the heroin or the opioids tapers out the highs and the lows. It used to be called manic depressive, bipolar. You know, it's not uncommon. We know lots of people who have had it, and it's very easily treatable. But we need to provide enough mental health treatment so that people don't self-medicate. Our public officials have stepped up to the plate. It is better to be late than never at all, but we've known about this epidemic for a lot of years. It's always easier as a politician to balance the budget on those who are heroin addicts. And I wanted to compliment initially some years ago Governor Shumlin of Vermont, who banked his entire governorship on the fact that when he gave a State of the State address, he spoke only about the opioid epidemic in bucolic Vermont. He has led the way, and he really needs to be commended. And it's just such a pleasure here. We have 3 treatment centers in New Hampshire, and I can honestly say that this state is really a step ahead of many others. And I really, really want to commend everybody, from law enforcement to our public officials to our educational system for that. And now, the internet sales of pills. Well, you know, if you want to buy pills, you can just go to the internet, so it's not just the doctors. So you can go to the internet site and find out where it's cheaper, where it's crushable, where it isn't. Now, this was some years ago, but this is what's led to the heroin epidemic. As you can see, in the Northeast, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut are some of the top 5 leading states in the country in which long-acting, extended-release opioids were prescribed. And that has been the watering of the garden of people with a genetic predisposition. So it's not just the doctors, though, because 53% of those who use pain relievers non-medically, age 12 or older, obtained it free from a friend. So I'm addicted to tennis, and I tore my rotator cuff. So I was at the Mass General Hospital. I had a very, very well-known physician operate on me, put a screw in here, cut this, move that, and my lovely wife picked me up. She said, "I've got your prescription." I was half groggy. I got home. I was in significant pain. And I found out that I had 30 Oxycontins. Wow, 30. So I took 2. That's all I needed. And luckily, I don't have the genetic predisposition. So what did I do with the other 28? Well, I sold a few on the street. I put some of my medicine cabinets so my grandchildren could eat them. And in fact, at house sales now, do you realize people are going to house sales now or open houses, and the first thing they do is go into excuse me, I use the bathroom, open up the medicine cabinet, and look for Oxys, or look for Valiums, or anything else. So, we need to be very, very careful and understand this. So this is just showing you now where the amount of heroin, the red line, started skyrocketing when OxyContin started tapering off back around 2010 when we reconstituted OxyContin. So now, I've been told I have 40 minutes, of which I have 16 3/4 minutes left. Is that correct? May I have 1 more minute, please? All right. So buckle your seatbelts, because I'm going to take you on a 45-minute ride in 15 minutes. So these are the national deaths you now see from fatal overdoses. The darker the color, the more statistically significant it is. So I don't want New Hampshire to feel left out in New England. This is interesting. Drugs now kill more people than guns or car accidents. And I don't want you to feel alone. This is Massachusetts from 2000 to 2015, and this is the percentage of patients who are now entering treatment who are listing heroin as their primary substance of use. Incredible. That's Massachusetts' adjusted death rate for opioid-related in Massachusetts versus the United States, and New Hampshire is similar. Now, I gave a talk recently in Stoneham, Mass. And in Canton, Mass. And I just wanted to show this up to you. This is what we're talking about. This is suburban America. In fact, one of the highest increases of heroin use now is suburban and rural America. And it was never an inner city disease. It was always, I should say it was never a minority disease, excuse me. It was started in the inner city, but Caucasians, Hispanics, and African Americans all used heroin back in 2004 at about the same rate. I'm going to show you a slide pretty soon that's going to blow you away. And this is East Boston, so that's inner city, and that's suburbia. Same problems, marked increase in opioid use. And these are the death rates that have significant increases in the from 2014 to 2015. And unfortunately, New Hampshire, as far as drug overdose death rate per capita, is second from the top. On the left are the number of deaths by town, and on the right is the amount of Narcan administration. Luckily, we have Narcan, but we're not saving our lives. And for those people out in society, and I know we all encounter this, well, why don't you just let them die? Most people who overdose on opioids and heroin don't die. They become disabled. They're wheelchair bound, they have strokes, they have brain illnesses, they have cardiac problems, and we take care of them as a society. It is a lot less expensive to treat proactively and save a life than to have a cavalier attitude. This is New Hampshire's overdose deaths. You can see where fentanyl is contributing now. This was done in 2013. In some communities in New Hampshire, up to 21% of high school students use heroin or prescription drugs without a doctor's prescription. That is growing the garden of heroin addiction today. And male and female, similar percentage. Now, let's talk about carfentanil. Can you see that little tiny, it's like the size of a pinhead. In fact, if you rub carfentanil on your hands, you can die. Carfentanil is 10,000 times stronger than morphine. This is what the problem we have today that we're facing on the streets. And I know that Governor Sununu talked about it, and actually some of the other speakers as well. And so these are the fentanyl deaths in New Hampshire in 2016. Far left is fentanyl alone. And in fact, in our treatment centers now in New Hampshire, people are coming in opioid withdrawal, and they are now, and a lot of them now are negative on toxicology screening, unless you order specifically fentanyl. So they're using pure fentanyl. Secondhand drugging and drinking. The families of people with the disease of addiction are also struggling. It is affecting 100 million people in this country. We've already talked about that it's migrated from the inner city to white men and women in their late 20s. And in fact, this graph shows the increase in use of heroin in non-Hispanic white, which has increased the most, non-Hispanic, black, and Hispanic, which has not increased nearly as significantly. So, you know, we can't label this as a minority inner city problem. And if those of you who think that it's related to income level, wrong. If those of you who think it's related to educational level, wrong. So the question I have for anyone here is, why is illicit drug use so high in the first 3 years of college, and why does it drop off so precipitously in the 4th year? What? They die. And they drop out. That's why. It's not that the 4th year college student says, I don't want to snort any more heroin, I'm not going to use any more cocaine, or I'm going to stop driving and drinking. It's that they're not around in college anymore. The toll is phenomenal. So we need to think of addiction as a biopsychosocial illness with genetic predisposition. We need to understand that a lot of these patients are self-medicating. It's a family illness. There are secondary complicating illnesses, HIV, hepatitis C, which is a silent scourge of our society today, and costs as well millions, if not billions of dollars to treat. The difference between tolerance, dependency, and addiction are subtle differences. I would ask that you all read about it because it's important. And unfortunately, I don't have the time today to talk about it. But basically, as you start using a drug, you build up a tolerance, so you need more and more of it. And alcohol is no different. To get the same bang, to get the same bang, you need more bucks. And dependency is when you have symptoms when you stop the drug. You stop alcohol, you have tremors, you go into DTs, you have hypertension. That's dependency. And addiction is not just current or prior dependency, it's drug-seeking behavior. It's the behavior related to the drug seeking. So let's remember that we may choose to start to use a drug, but we do not choose to become addicted. So, pop quiz. I've got 9 more minutes. Pop quiz. What president gave a special message to Congress that said, at this time the evidence indicates that methadone, I know that's that horrible word, methadone is a useful tool in work of rehabilitating heroin addicts? What president was that? Wrong. Right party though. Nixon. Why? War on crime. Back in 1971. And in fact, if you look at the studies, this study was done in 1991 at 6 methadone treatment centers. The gray represents the amount of crime days before treatment, and the yellow recommends the amount of crime days committed by the patient in treatment. So we need to think of medication-assisted treatment, whether it be methadone, buprenorphine, Vivitrol, as the same way we think of diabetes and insulin, or heart disease and hypertensive medications. And I talked a little bit about President Kennedy. So the three medication-assisted drugs we have right now are methadone, which is a full agonist, buprenorphine, which is a partial agonist. The methadone you find on the streets is not from methadone treatment centers. It's from doctors' offices or illicitly purchased. At methadone treatment centers, the methadone is distributed by liquid. The patient drinks it in front of the nurse and says, "Thank you very much, have a nice day." When there were pills being distributed, and there was incompletely dissolved, patients that actually park some of the particles, spit it out and sell it on the street. But that no longer happens. Now, what's the difference between methadone and buprenorphine? Well, first of all, I should say methadone and buprenorphine, which are both opioids, and both are used to treat pain, that neither of those create a high if in fact you're already opioid tolerant, and in fact normalize the brain structure and function that has been disrupted by years of heroin or opioid use. The only reason I'm showing this slide is to understand that buprenorphine, just as there's not one antibiotic to cure all pneumonias, there's buprenorphine and methadone individually aren't for each and every patient. Lower tolerant patients can do fine on buprenorphine, but what we have in simplistic terms is a ceiling effect, and it doesn't matter how much more buprenorphine, Suboxone you take, you don't get any greater effect. And with methadone, therefore, those patients do better on methadone. And in fact, we can take some patients on methadone and transition them to Suboxone. We can get people into treatment on Suboxone, find out it's not working that well because their tolerance is so high, and then move them over to the methadone treatment track. There's a danger, though, of naltrexone, and that is that opioid dependency drops fairly quickly. And so if somebody is opioid dependent and they've stopped using, and then you put them on naltrexone, and they then go out after the naltrexone wears off, and then they then go out and use their 4 or 5 bags, which they've been used to using, their tolerances drop because they haven't used for a period of time, and they die. So you have to pick those patients very selectively. What is our goal of treatment? Our goal is not replacing one drug for another. Our goal is to treat this as a chronic illness and to improve quality of life and minimizing symptoms. And in fact, if you look at the relapse rates for addiction, it is no greater really than type 2 diabetes, hypertension, or asthma. For those of us or those in society who say, oh, well, they're always back in treatment. Well, so is the person in congestive heart failure who eats a bag of potato chips on Super Bowl Sunday. And so is the person who smokes cigarettes who ends up with hypertensive crisis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So is the person who's sedentary, right, who ends up with significant back pain. So we have to think about this as a chronic illness. And spending money on it saves dollars. If I could invest my IRA and get as great a return as I can get with prevention and treatment, then I wouldn't be up here talking today. I'd be out living in Hawaii, I guess. So, the lifetime model, for every dollar spent on methadone treatment yields $38 in savings over the course of a lifetime in treatment, in crime, and employment. And I can't remember who spoke about it. It might have been Governor Sununu, or it might be the amount of dollars we lose in the workplace from illicit drug use is incredible. This is a study done in Maine. This will blow you away. 2015, 90 of people in methadone treatment, 93% decrease in illicit substance use, 91% decrease in arrests, 59% decrease in psychiatric conditions, 50% decrease in homelessness, and a 37% increase in employment, and 52% of kids returning to their parents and no longer in foster care. Staggering statistics. So even if you think it's mind over matter, treatment works. Treatment saves dollars. So drug addiction is a brain disease that can be treated. I'm not going to get into this except to say SBIRT is a way of screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment, and schools should be doing it as really a cardinal way to start to address this issue. So we can't hide from the truth. We need to dig a little deeper. We need to educate everybody in our society. We need to educate our politicians who do not understand it. Our politicians need to educate those of us who do not understand it. We have to stop talking in sound bites. It's a chronic illness. It's not an inner city disease. It's an equal opportunity disease. You now know who and what to blame for the heroin epidemic, and treatment works. So as I wrote in an op-ed that got published in the Boston Globe, there should be just as many public service announcements about addiction as there are Viagra and Cialis commercials. Can you imagine? We have Viagra commercials every day. Take a Viagra, sit in a bathtub and hold hands. It's like, I don't need Viagra to sit in a bathtub and hold hands. The solution is to decrease the demand with bold public initiatives and change attitude. It is the most humanitarian and the fiscally responsible thing to do. So I always donate all my speaking fees and all of my author proceeds to treatment centers, homeless shelters, and educational opportunities. I will Skype in or visit book clubs, however large, however small, to destigmatize the disease of addiction. So please buy books because they'll benefit CADY. I knew I was going to do that.